Hello.
Good morning.
Morning. Hello, Munchu. Hello. All right. Well, welcome to the meeting. We'll have people coming along. Good morning. We'll have people coming along momentarily. So, I hope everyone's week was good. Here we go. Here's Brian. He's outside. That's good.
Yep, beautiful day.
Yeah.
How's everybody? Hi.
Yeah, hi. Okay. I was kind of waiting for Jesse to show up so we could start the sort of the reports on where we are. But why don't we just start? So who wants to go first?
I can go ahead.
Okay.
I don't have too much of an update. I've been busy traveling. We had the Cognition Futures reading group, which was good, despite 1/3 of us not having read the chapter.
Oh, yeah.
I'm looking forward to meeting next week. I watched a talk from Michael Levin, which Jesse asked if I wanted to say more about that later, and I will. I'll try.
Okay.
Let's see. That's about it.
All right. Well, that sounds good. And then I think Jesse asked you in one of the Slack channels if you were interested in organizing philosophy, some philosophy work. So
Yeah. Yeah, I'm happy to contribute in a mentorship role in whatever way I can. I don't have any ideas yet about like specific projects, but I'll think about it.
yeah, that's good. Yeah, I look forward to that. I've been looking forward to sort of making that gel because sometimes it takes the right initiative, the right person, and to make it happen. So, yeah, we'll talk more about that later. Very good, Brian.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. By the way, great presentation yesterday, Bradley.
Oh, thanks.
It was really great to hear about kind of our side of things alongside all the other Google Summer of Code stuff that was being talked about.
Yeah.
So that was really, really nice. It was like, yes, one of us.
Hello.
Yeah, what have I been doing? Yeah, right?
Morning.
Himanshu? Yeah, it was great. So that's what I've been up to. I've just been in
Hello,
Google
Himanshu.
land. I won a trivia game yesterday at the Google Summer of Code thing, so that was pretty cool. I got a free mug or something.
Well,
right.
welcome to the meeting.
I've been doing
We'll
a
have
lot
people
of work
coming
trying
along.
to
Good
get
morning.
my
We'll have people coming along
model
momentarily.
for the collective cognition
So,
for AI ethics, the computational
I
model.
hope
of the open
everyone's
source
week was
community going.
good. Here we go. Here's Brian.
I'm in Fort Greene Park. in
He's
Brooklyn, New
outside.
York right now.
Oh, okay.
That's where I'm at right now.
That's good.
Because I'm doing a music thing. Yep, beautiful day. And then
Yeah.
everybody tomorrow night.
Yeah, hi.
So, yeah.
Okay.
But while I'm here, I've been doing.
Kind of waiting for Jesse to show up so we can start
basically
the
just drawing a million diagrams.
sort of the
trying to
reports
get
on
them
where we are.
tuned just
But
right.
why don't we just
I
start?
also emailed Mick Ashby
So
about
who wants to go first?
And I also emailed Mick Ashby about speaking or
I
giving
can
a
go
guest
ahead.
got
Okay.
or just attending a meeting.
I
That was just yesterday,
don't
so I
have too much
CC'd
of an
you,
update. I've
Jesse,
been
and Bradley. So
busy
if
traveling.
I said anything wrong, you can try to patch it up. But I think I
the
was pretty
Cognition
careful.
Futures reading
Hopefully, I
group,
didn't scare him
which
away.
was good,
Oh,
despite
that's great. Thank you.
1/3 of us not having read the
But
chapter.
yeah, beyond that, just
Oh,
been
yeah.
doing a lot of reading.
I'm looking
I
forward
really
to
appreciate
meeting next week.
the PDFs that you've been posting, Amanda, especially
I
lately.
watched
They've
a
been super
talk from Michael
interesting
Levin,
and helpful.
which Jesse asked if I wanted
yeah.
to say more about that later, and
I
I
don't
will.
even know
I'll
where
try.
to begin.
Okay.
So great. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, the ones in the methods
All right.
side
That
project.
sounds good.
Yeah, particularly,
And then I think Jesse asked you in one of the Slack channels if you were interested in organizing
and then
philosophy,
like that one was just like
some philosophy work. So
I
I haven't read that one yet.
Oh, I've
I
just
printed
started.
it, so I will. Yeah, I'm happy to contribute
Okay, great.
in a
so yeah,
mentorship
I'm
role
still
in
kind of
whatever
in the
way
reading,
I can.
kind of meshing things together phase.
I don't
so-
have any ideas
but
yet about
I
like,
was really
specific
inspired by a few
projects,
of the
but
talks yesterday during the GSOC meeting
think
where
about it.
they were discussing getting
that's
demos
good.
out.
Yeah, I look
as
forward to
practice.
that. I've been looking
So
forward
my
to
goal for next week
sort
is
of
to get
making
a
that gel
demo of
because
something
sometimes
that
it takes
works in some
the
way.
right initiative, the right
Even if it's
person,
a
and
really
to
stupid example
make it happen.
of collective cognition.
Yeah, we'll
like
talk more
maybe
about
people
that
sitting around a
later.
dinner table and they have to pass the peas. Just like
Very good.
something to get
Brian.
things moving in
Sure.
a direction, even
Yeah,
if
thanks.
it's,
By the way,
kind
great
of silly.
presentation
Yeah,
yesterday.
so
Brad.
that's my
Oh,
goal for
thanks.
next week. It was really
Did
great
mention,
to hear
like,
about kind
demo
of our
time
side
or
of things
deploy or
Oh,
alongside
yeah.
all the other Google Summer of
Yes,
Code
I think that
stuff
was mentioned a little bit.
being talked about.
Yeah.
So that was
Yes.
really nice.
Steve
Yes.
Jobs, right?
One of us.
Something like that.
But,
There's been a lot
yeah,
of
what have I
like
been doing?
iterations
Yeah,
of
right,
that
Himanshu,
and like
yeah, it was great.
stuff at MIT.
So that's what I've been up
and-
to. I've just been in Google
and,
land.
That's something we can maybe talk a
I
little
won
bit
a
about
trivia
later today.
game
if we want to
yesterday
go
at the
there.
Google Summer of Code
Some
thing, so that was
development
pretty
stuff.
cool.
But, see what's
I got a
on
free
top.
mug or something.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Brian, for that
I've
update.
been
Yes,
doing a lot of
I'll
work
talk a little bit
trying
about
to
the
get
GSOC
my computational
event a little
models
bit in a little
for
bit.
the collective cognition for
Himanshu,
AI ethics, the
do you have an
computational
update for
model of
us?
an open source community going.
Yeah, so
I'm in
yesterday,
Fort
like
Greene
even
Park
I
in Brooklyn, New York.
attended the GSOC meeting.
That's
It
where
was
I'm at
really
right
great. Like it was around
because
like
I'm
4
doing a
hours, and
music
I tried to attend
thing here
most
in the
of it.
city, and then I go
And
back
like I really liked your
tomorrow night,
presentation,
tonight.
Rafi.
So,
And
yeah.
also
But while
congratulations
I'm
to
here,
Brian
I've been
for
doing
winning
a lot
the quiz.
of reading and
Uh,
writing and just
And
basically
like
just drawing a
mostly
million
right
diagrams.
now, like the
trying to
GSOC part,
get
like
them
I'm just
tuned just right.
getting into the collective cognition
I
model
also
part.
emailed Mick Ashby
I'm
about
reading a few
and I
papers
also
which is
emailed
related
Mick
to
Ashby
MIRL,
about
like multi-agent
speaking or
reinforcement
giving a
learning.
guest lecture or just
And
attending a
I've
meeting.
also created a
that was just
PPT for
yesterday,
it,
so I
like
CC'd you,
regarding
Jesse and
the
Bradley. So,
around the about
know,
the
if I
proposal and some
said
stuff I've
anything
done right
wrong,
now.
you can try to patch it up. But I think I
And
was pretty careful.
yeah,
Hopefully I
that's
didn't
about
scare him
it.
away.
Like, and from next
That's
week,
great,
like I'm
thank you.
just like
But
trying
yeah,
to figure
beyond that,
things
just
out,
been doing
like
a lot of reading.
what
I
to
really
consider and what not.
appreciate the PDFs that you've been posting,
in regards to
Amanda,
the
especially lately. They've been super interesting.
Okay, yeah, that's good.
helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna find that
I
that's
don't
like the
even know where to
first step.
begin.
It's like step
So
zero.
great.
So
thank
it's
you
like
so
the
much
thing you
for
do
that.
before you start doing
Yeah,
any
so one
sort
from
of
the Beckett's
because you have to make your
project.
assumptions about the
Yeah,
model, and that's
particularly,
one of the most
mnemonics
important thing
as
is
contributing to
what are
subjective
my,
experience,
especially for something like
mnemonic
this,
as subjective
what are my
experience. That one's
assumptions,
fascinating.
and can I make different
phenomenology,
assumptions
that one
and
was
get a
just
different
like-
result, and then why is
You know,
that
I
result
haven't read
different?
that one yet.
But that's
Oh,
like you know
I've
the
started.
you have
I
to
will.
start with like your
Okay,
assumption
great.
and say
So
this
yeah,
is
I'm still kind of in the reading,
this is supposed to
kind of
represent
meshing things
this is
together
supposed to
phase.
represent that.
So-
So you build a
but,
representation
I
or
was really
an
inspired
abstraction
by
of the
a few
problem.
talks yesterday during the GSOC meeting
And,
where
you know, you might
they were
find
discussing
that,
getting demos out.
some
as a
assumptions
practice.
work well and
So
some don't.
my goal for
It's
next
kind
week
of,
is
you know,
get
I don't want to say it's
demo of
magic, but it's
something
definitely
that
not,
works in some way.
there's no
even if it's a
guidebook
really
for this.
stupid example
So you just have to,
of,
like,
of
work
collective
and see what
cognition,
works,
like maybe people sitting
and
around
then
the
make
dinner
the
table and
case
they
that
have to pass
that's the
keys.
thing that
You
it's
know, just
supposed
like
to represent.
something to
Um,
get things
So,
moving
I mean,
in
you know,
a
like with
direction,
agent-based
even if
modeling, it's the same way.
kind of
You know,
silly.
you're going to be,
So
like, your
that's my goal
agents
for
are going to
next
have, like,
They mentioned,
you know,
like,
some
demo or
properties.
die or deploy
They're going to
or die.
interact. You're going to have to set up some
Yes, I think
interaction
that was
rules or
mentioned a
maybe
little
some
bit,
policies.
Yeah.
You're going to have to
Yeah.
justify those, you know,
Yeah,
why
right.
those work, why those don't work.
Something like that.
And
There's
then,
been
you
a
know,
lot of,
that'll
like,
be,
iterations of that.
you know, and
like,
people may or may not
stuff at
agree with you
MIT
on that.
and-
That's going to be another
and,
thing.
like,
But,
That's something we can maybe talk a little bit
you know,
about
we'll
later
talk
today
about it
if
and
we
we'll
wanna
see if
go
that's a
there,
reasonable
like, some
assumption.
development stuff.
And sometimes if you
See
read,
what's
like,
on
the
the docket.
literature and you find things
That
are
sounds
happening. Like
Well,
there's
thank you,
some,
Brian, for that update.
You know,
Yes,
thing
I'll-
that you
I'll talk
see in
a little
open
bit about
source
the GSOC
communities, some
events a
behavior
little
that
bit
you can
in a little
replicate. That's often a good sign
Himanshu,
because it means that
you
you're
have an
able
update
to,
for us?
you know, given a set of agents,
So
you
like
give them some
yesterday, like,
simple
when I
cognitive
attended the
dimensions,
GSOC
you know,
meeting, it
some,
was really
some
great.
sort of
Like, it was
faculties
around,
that
like,
they can
4 hours,
interact
and
with,
I tried to attend most
and then
of
they
it.
can replicate this
And, like,
behavior.
I really liked your
Is that you're
presentation,
probably
Rafi.
doing something
And,
right, although I
also
wouldn't say that they
congratulations to
generalize
Brian for winning the
behavior.
quiz.
They just
Uh,
replicate that
and
behavior.
like
So,
mostly right now,
yeah, I think
the
that,
GSOC
yeah,
part,
I think
like,
both
I'm
Brian
just,
and Himanshu are
getting into the
on the right
collective
track.
cognition
So I know
model part.
Himanshu wants to present.
I'm reading a few papers.
Yeah,
which
you're
is
getting an
related to
abstraction
MARS,
ready in the
like
form of
for
code
deep
where I am
reinforcement
trying to
learning.
get it in 2 weeks.
And
So
I've
yeah, it's
also
not always
created a
like
PPT for it,
really,
regarding
you can't really
around
get it.
about my proposal and
Sometimes you
some
have to
stuff
just
I've
kind
done
of put
right
things
now.
together as they stand.
And
And you could
Yeah,
work on
that's
these for
about
years
it.
and never get it right.
And
So
from
it's
next
not,
week, like I'm just
it's not something that
trying
we
to
expect to
figure
get
things out,
perfect.
what
Don't
to
worry
consider
about that.
and
Just
what
worry
not.
about if it looks
In
reasonable.
regards to the model.
And that's something that you
Okay,
do.
yeah, that's
programming
good.
a lot.
Thank you.
You just try to.
Yeah,
get to
you're going to find that that's like the
and,
first step.
It's like step
sometimes
zero.
that's not good, but it's,
So it's like
the thing you do
you know,
before you start doing any.
that's why
sort
people
of,
work. That's why people do.
because you have to make your
software
assumptions
engineering
about
for
the
years.
model, and that's really the most important
So,
thing. Is
Yeah, I do have
what
a
are my,
question about
especially
that.
for something like this.
So
What are my
I'm
assumptions?
my goal is
And
in
can
the
I
next,
make different
I
assumptions
think
and
it's,
get a different result? And
trying
then
to
why is
remember
that
how long
result
this whole
different?
period is.
But
I
that's
think
like
within the next 4 or
you have to
5
start
weeks
with like your
is the time
assumption.
I've given myself
and
to
say,
make
this is,
computational model and try to
This
express
is
it in
supposed to
Python
represent
so that
this.
it's
This is supposed to
we're able
represent
to
that. So
start
you build a
recording it as an
representation
MMO
or
run simulation.
an abstraction of
Does
the
that
problem.
still seem like a good timeline, or should I start?
And,
working on it
you
a
might
little
find that
sooner than that?
some
How many
assumptions
weeks are
work
you
well
planning
and
for
some
this?
don't. It's kind of, I don't want to say it's magic, but it's definitely not, there's no guidebook for this. So you just have to work and see what works, and then make the case that that's
Actually,
the
yeah, I do
thing
think
that
that's
it's supposed to
the right amount
represent.
of time. I think because this is
something
I mean,
that you can't,
like with agent-based modeling,
it's not a
the same
simple,
way.
straightforward thing.
You're going to be
If
like
it
your
were a simple,
agents are going to
straightforward
have
thing, I
like
would say that's a little
some
long,
properties.
but
You're
trying to
interact. You're going to
well,
have
I mean,
to set up some.
and the thing is
interaction
you want to
rules
be
and maybe
able to
some policies.
demo something.
You're going to have to
weekly.
justify.
So you want to have
those,
like
why
week
those
one, you want to
work,
have a demo.
why those
that's
don't
pretty
work.
rough.
And then
it doesn't
really
that'll
look
be
very good, but doesn't really matter.
and
because
people
you
may
wanna
or may
get
not
something
agree with
working.
you on that. That's going to
And
be
then
another
week
thing,
2,
but,
you would refine that and say, we'll
okay,
talk about
now,
it. We'll see if
we got
that's a
it
reasonable
working.
assumption. Can we add
And sometimes
in
if
things
you
that
read
are,
like the literature and you
um,
find things are
important that maybe we
like
missed in
there's
the
some,
first implementation.
in
And
week
thing
3
that
you're
you
going
see
to
in
refine it
open
even
source
more.
communities. Then in week
Some
4 you'll
behavior
have a
that you
finished
can
product
replicate.
that's reasonable.
That's
that
often
you
a
can
good
move
sign
forward
because
with
it means
for
that
the
you're
next
able
step.
to
Because
that
given a
that
set of
process
agents
will help you
give them some
understand
simple limitations of your
cognitive
model
dimensions,
and if it
you know,
maps
some-
well.
some sort of
And you might even
faculties that
try
they can
like
interact
different
with.
types of experiments,
and then they
like,
can replicate this behavior.
you might say
that
I
you're
want to
probably
model
doing something
maybe a
right.
couple of toy
Although I wouldn't
problems,
say
which are
that
very
they
simple problems,
generalize
like you're
behavior.
mentioning
They just
passing the P's.
replicate that behavior.
This is something you find in a computer
yeah, I
science
think
textbook where
yeah,
they just
I
want to
think
show
both Brian and
that
Himanshu
you
are
can do this process
on the right track. So I know
and model
Himanshu
it.
wants to present,
So that would
work. But then that's just
Yeah,
one
you're getting
thing.
an
and
abstraction
so
ready in the
if
form
you
of
want to
code
really
where I'm
test the
trying to
robustness
get
of your
in
model,
2
you might
weeks.
do some.
So yeah, it's not
little
always
simple
like
task. And then
really,
get to work on that. You can't
and
really
see what
get
the
it.
performance is.
Sometimes
And so
you
if
have
you
to
do
just
it a
kind of
couple
put things
times,
together as they stand.
you'll get a sense.
And you
for
could work
what
on
you
these
can
for
do,
years and never get it
what you
right.
need
So it's
to
not
improve upon.
it's not something.
I just
that we
want
expect
I
to
want
get
you to
perfect.
have some momentum
Don't
going
worry
on,
about
like,
that. Just
every
worry
week.
about
If it looks
get
reasonable
through the week and say,
and that's
I did
something
this
that
programming,
but
I also got
you
this
do
sort
in
of
programming a lot.
result.
You
that I
just
can
try to
build
get
on
it to
for
work.
next time. And
So
otherwise,
sometimes that's not good,
you
but
know,
you
you
get
get
stuck
like,
on
refining the code.
That's
or
why people work.
you get stuck
That's why
on
people
something
do
and you
software
can't move
engineering
forward.
for
And
years.
all of a sudden, you spend 3 weeks trying to
So-
get it to work, and
Good
it's
morning.
I do have a question about that.
That's very helpful.
My
Himanshu?
goal
Yeah,
is within the next, but that'll be my stupid demo. It's,
okay. Yeah, that's great.
trying
Yeah.
to remember how long the whole period is.
Yeah, no,
Within the next
Himanshu
4
wants
or
to
5
present
weeks,
something.
well,
I'm
from
giving
Jesse,
myself
if you
to
have
make a
updates, we'll have
computational
people
model
coming
and
around.
try to
Good
express
morning
it
for
in
your
Python
updates.
so
Well,
that
people coming
we're
along
able to
momentarily.
coordinate that
I
logo and
might
run
go
simulations.
So-
Does that still seem like a good timeline?
Yeah, Sharon's
or
week
should I
was
start
good.
working on it
Here we go. Here's
sooner
Brian.
than that?
What was your update?
How many
Guys
weeks are you
outside.
planning for this?
About
That's
a
good.
Not much. I
third
can
of
say
the
more
time.
about the
Yep,
micro
beautiful day.
Yeah.
I'll
hi.
do my best with that.
Making sure
Oh yeah.
Okay.
that the assumptions that we're making are.
It's kind of waiting for
Um,
Jesse to
my
show up.
update.
So we can
Actually, yeah, I
start
do
the-
think that's the right amount of time. I think
We're-
because this is
sort of the reports
something
on
that
where
you
we
can't.
are. But
It's not a simple, straightforward.
why don't we
thing.
just start?
If it were a simple,
So
straightforward
let's
thing,
do
I'd
it
say
first.
that's a little long.
I
But you're
think what I
trying to.
in a
Well, I mean,
conceptual
and
sense,
the thing is you want to be able to demo something
I think in a
weekly.
conceptual
So you want to have
sense,
week 1, you want to have a demo
I'm gonna
that's
talk
pretty
about
rough,
things in terms
and it doesn't
of-
really look very good, but doesn't really
I
matter
think
because
it's
you
a
want to
really
get
great
something
time
working.
to ride the wave
And
of
then week 2, you would refine that and say,
let's talk
okay,
about
now,
implementation.
we got it
or
working.
integrations,
Can
like
we add in
focusing on,
things that are,
I
important that maybe we missed in the first implementation? Then week 3, you're going to refine it even more. Then in week 4, you'll
I've been
have a
around
finished
enough to
product
been
that's
speaking
reasonable
before, but the
that you
lab,
can move forward
lab
with
goes
for
inside
the next step. Because
that'll be my
that process
update
will help you understand the limitations of your Jesse and ask you in one of the Slack channels, and you might even try like different types of experiments, like philosophy. You might say, I want to model maybe a couple of toy problems, which are very simple problems, like you were mentioning, passing the peas. This is something you find in a computer science textbook where they just want to show that you can do this process and model it. So that would, but then that's just one thing. And so if you want to really tell the robustness here, all you can do is some other sort of making that gel and then get it to work. Sometimes it takes and see the right initiative as a person. And so if you do it a couple times, make it happen. You'll get a sense. Yeah, we'll talk more about that later. You need to improve upon. Very good. I just want I want you to have some momentum going on every week. Get through the week and say, I did this programming, but I also got this sort of result that I can build on for next time. So otherwise, you get stuck on refining the code, or you get stuck on something and you can't move forward. And all of a sudden, you've spent 3 weeks trying to get it to work.
Right?
Consistent iterative things.
So that's very helpful.
And I feel like this is a great week to talk about.
I won a trivia game yesterday.
Okay, yeah, that's great.
Demo
That was pretty cool.
I know Amanchu wants to present something, and just Jesse, if you have updates, you can do your update for your
I think
updates.
people who are not okay. I might go
Yeah, sure.
Community going.
One of the nice things
Um,
about people out there.
I'm in
What was your
Fort
update?
Greene
Because I know
Park
very
in Brooklyn, New York
software.
right now. That's
Oriented.
where I'm at right now.
Not much.
But
I can
sort of
say
just
more
the
about your
iteration
Michael Levin talk
process.
if you want me
And
to.
then I go
More
back
about that to
tomorrow
come.
night.
As
It's
far
like
as
my desk
specific
with that.
updates.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. There's a
So,
nice
but
thing
while
for
I'm here,
it.
I've been doing a lot of
my
reading and writing and just basically just drawing a million diagrams, trying to get them tuned just right. I also
There's been a bunch of
emailed
papers
Mick
I sent
Ashby
him
about
my update.
and I also emailed Mick
I think
Ashby
what
about
I think I actually in
or
a
giving a guest
conceptual
lecture
sense,
or just attending a meeting.
spending a little more time
That
yesterday.
was yesterday, so I CC'd you, Jesse and
I
Bradley,
found a
so
nice one
if I
talk about
said anything wrong, we can try to patch it up. But I think I was pretty careful.
I think it's a really great time to just ride the wave of analogies, ecological
But
let's
yeah,
talk
beyond that,
about
I've been doing a lot of
implementation
readings. I
and
really
iterations that were mentioned
appreciate
later
the
today.
CMs that
Awesome.
you've been posting, Amanda,
I
especially
want
lately.
to sit
They've
down
been
and demo.
super
I would like to
interesting
go
and
a
helpful.
weekend of just doing paid stuff,
Yeah.
just because I don't know.
I don't even know where
I've been around
It's
enough to
so
work
great.
in speeches
So thank
before,
you so
but
much
it's
for that.
allowed kind of be a pain. Well, let's go
Yeah,
and
the ones in the
I guess that'll be my
methods project.
I still
Yeah,
update slash
yeah,
commentary
mnemonics as
in the
subjective
reading group
experience
on
or
Thursday night.
mnemonics as subjective experience. That one's
I
fascinating.
when I came to the lab, it was super iterations, the deployment buzz, because I came
You know,
up
I haven't read that one
and
yet.
then here's where I found a lot
I've just
of
started.
So I will.
exploration. But the greeting group's been great. Different things
Yeah,
that happen
I'm
is
kind
so
of in the
good.
reading.
I am going to
kind of bring
ride the
things
wave
together
of.
phase.
There's also some overlap
But
between.
I was really inspired by a few
I don't. I
talks
won't.
yesterday
I'm a
at the
mentor. I'm not a
where
twister.
they were discussing
stuff,
getting
but
demos out.
there are sort of
and
some
to
weird
practice.
things. Wherever I'm working,
Yeah.
I might even
my
like.
goal for next week is
Because
to
I
get
am
a
not as
demo
restrained
of
by the
something
timeline.
that
There are
works
some
in
things
some
that
way.
I may do a little.
Even if it's a
I'm
really
trying to flesh
stupid
out
example
other.
of
Jenny got me
collective
to
cognition,
the add
like
around
maybe
or
people sitting around a
augmentation
dinner
some of the
table and they have
ideas.
to
'Cause I have some of my
you know,
own.
just like
and
something
some,
to
a
get
conference that I
things
think, but I'm not
moving
gonna. I don't want them to
in a
take center
direction,
stage
even if
for this
it's,
year sort of something.
kind of
So
silly.
that's something
Yeah,
that I'm
That's my goal for next week.
They mentioned like demo or she wanted to find out part of the panel of Twisterland.
Yeah, I
on
think
my
that was
make
mentioned
believe
a little bit, yeah.
to you go whether it's Frontier Map or some cards and part of the something like that. There's my own variations of that. But we're also like there's a lot of show. And I feel like that's something we can maybe talk a little bit about later today if we want to go there. Apply demo slash deploy concept. That's something that we talk about a lot.
Well, thank you, Brian, for that update. Yes, I'll talk a little bit about the GSOC
I think there's a lot of
event in a little bit.
Who are
Himanshu, you have an update for us?
The whole stuff about, I think one of the nice things about
Yeah, so like
Google
yesterday, like
versus
even I
very software.
attended the GSOC meeting, it was really great. Like it was around like
but sort
4
of
hours
just the
and I
iteration
tried to attend
process.
most
There's a
of
lot
it.
of
And
more
like,
about that.
I really liked your presentation.
As far as
Vasu.
kind of playing with
And
updates.
also congratulations to Brian for winning the quiz. and like mostly right now, like the GSOC part, like I'm just getting into the collective cognition model
There's been a
part.
bunch of papers I've taken
Like
out.
the
The papers that have voiced
two
and
papers
shown
which is related to MIRL,
that is
like
like actually one of
20
Avery's. I
journal.
think Avery's the most like.
And I've also
spending even more time
created a PPT for it, like regarding the around the proposal
Avery
and
found an
some
artist
stuff I've
who
done
was
right now.
crazy about
And
manifesting stuff.
yeah, that's about
And
it.
I'm
Like,
playing that
and
role.
from next
The one
week,
about
like I'm just
analogies.
like
He could have ecological
trying
and
to
very,
figure
very
things out,
interesting.
like
That was
what to consider and what
definitely
not.
sort of a side project and everything else.
regards
But
to the
I
model.
is a consistent down and create a little hub that's. I would
Okay,
like
yeah,
that
that's good.
a week
Thank
off,
you.
so,
Yeah, you're gonna find that that's like the first step. It's like step 0. So it's like the thing you do before you start doing any sort of, because you have to make your assumptions about the model. And that's one of the most important things
but it's
is
going well. And
what are
more-
my, especially for
more
something like this,
when
what are my
I
assumptions?
maybe sometimes
And
the
can
future
I make different
so
assumptions and get a
we'll
different
see.
result?
But
And then why is that result different? But that's like, you know, you have to start with like your assumption and say this is supposed to represent this is supposed to represent that. So you build a representation or an abstraction of the problem. And you know, you might find that some assumptions work well and some don't. It's kind of, you know, I don't want to say it's magic, but it's definitely not, there's no guidebook for this. So you just have to like work and see what works, and then make the case that that's the thing that it's supposed to represent. So I mean, you know, like with agent-based modeling, it's the same way. You know, you're going to be like your agents are going to have like, you know, some properties. They're going to interact. You're going to have to set up some interaction rules or maybe some policies. You're going to have to justify those, you know, why those work, why those don't work. And then, you know, that'll be, you know, people may or may not agree with you on that. That's going to be another thing. But, you know, we'll talk about it and we'll see if that's a reasonable assumption. And sometimes if you read, like, the literature and you find things are happening, right? Like there's some, you know, thing that you see in open source communities, some behavior that you can replicate. That's often a good sign because it means that you're able to, you know, given a set of agents, you give them some simple cognitive dimensions, you know, some sort of faculties that they can interact with, and then they can replicate this behavior. It means that you're probably doing something right, although I wouldn't say that they generalize behavior, they just replicate that behavior. So yeah, I think that, yeah, I think both Brian and Himanshu are on the right track. So I know Himanshu wants to present, yeah, you're getting an abstraction ready in the form of code where I am trying to get it in 2 weeks. So yeah, it's not always like really, you know, you can't really get it. Sometimes you have to just kind of put things together as they stand, and you could work on these for years and never get it right. So it's not, you know, it's not something that we expect to get perfect. Don't worry about that. Just worry about like if it looks reasonable, and that's something that, you know, you do in programming a lot. You just try to get it to work, and you know, sometimes that's not good, but it's like, you know, that's why people work. That's why people do software engineering for years. So,
but it's going well.
I do have a question about that.
The thing is that when
So I'm trying. My goal
maybe
is
sometime in the
within
future, I want to be able to show something
I
like
think
this.
it's trying to say like how long the whole
Today
period
is
is.
like
I think
so
it's within the next
around like
4 or 5 weeks is the time I've given myself to
it's very
make a
cool.
computational
But, like,
model and try to
and outside
read
of
it in
that,
Python so
if
that
things
it's
get well,
we're
that will
able
come
to
out some
start
other stuff.
porting it out
And
to
next
that
week
logo
is
and run
entire lot
simulations.
too, like the
Does that still
visual
seem like a
stuff.
good timeline, or
No,
should I start
it's
working
kind
on
of
it
I don't
sooner
want.
than that?
I've had so much stuff in my life.
how many weeks are you planning for this?
Read a lot of paper. There's ways to approach it. That's what I wanted to do. Sometimes you have a reality with it to be like stuff with people. One thing, maybe we can. I would really like to enjoy about this.
Actually, yeah, I do think that's the right amount of time. I think because this is something that you can't, like, it's not a simple, straightforward thing. If it were a simple, straightforward thing, I'd say that's a little long, but you're trying to, well, I mean, and the thing is you want to be able to, like, demo something weekly. So you want to have, like, week 1, you want to have a demo that's pretty rough, and it doesn't really look very good, but doesn't really really matter because you want to get something working. And then week 2, you would refine that and say, okay, now we got it working. Can we add in things that are important that maybe we missed in the first implementation? In week 3, you're going to refine it even more. Then in week 4, you'll have a finished product that's reasonable that you can move forward with for the next step, because that process will help you understand limitations of your model and if it maps well. And you might even try like different types of experiments. Like you might say, I want to model maybe a couple of toy problems, which are very simple problems, like you were mentioning, passing the peas. This is something you'd find in a computer science textbook where they just want to show that you can do this process and model it. So that would work. But then, that's just one thing. And so if you want to really test the robustness of your model, you might do some other little simple test and then get it to work on that and see what the performance is. And so if you do it a couple times, you'll get a sense for what it can do, what you need to improve upon. I just want, I want you to have some momentum going on, like every week. Get through a week and say, I did this programming, but I also got this sort of result that I can build on for next time. So, otherwise, you get stuck on refining the code, or you get stuck on something and you can't move forward, and all of a sudden you've spent 3 weeks trying to get it to work. And it's,
the thing is
that's very helpful. Thank you. So next week
I want to be able to show something at that meeting.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Today's like.
I know Himanshu wants to present something, and just Jesse, if you have updates, you can do your updates or your updates.
Okay. This is like super a lot. It's very obvious.
Yeah, sure.
So it's kind of opportunity. And what was your update? As I may say later. Anyway, I think that's my. There's ways to.
Not much. I can say more about the Michael Levin talk.
So would you want us to email that to you today, Jesse?
I'll do my best with that.
As soon as oh yeah.
Great.
Ways to approach that. I'll make sure that I'll make sure that you and will not. You gotta, especially like in the funding. There's no particular academia or doing research. Hey. There might other tools you don't know. I think something to be out there in a hashtag. Research is not churning out stuff all the time. It's not. I think in a conceptual sense, sort of great, but it's also about things in different. Who knows if you can. I think it's a really great time. I refer to ride the wave of. That's almost like let's talk about implementations and iterations and anyway, how do you deal with oncoming freestyle things? Demo.
Yeah, I think that's great. And we'll talk in a little bit maybe about the VR stuff, because I have some ideas about what you could cover. And, so I wanted to get to Amanda and Himanshu first. So I guess you can go with Amanda first. Did you have the things on Levin that you want? Yeah.
When I came to lab, it was super iteration, void, back then, focus,
cell intelligence,
a lot about
morphological spaces.
exploration,
And I went
instead of all of that,
morphological
I am going to ride the wave
no, I think I understand.
polls, talk about
His
what stuff,
main
what's,
point was
I'm a mentor on the lab,
seen as collective intelligence.
but there are sort of some adjacent things
In biology,
and I might even
says
because
biology
I am
uses
not
a
as constrained by
multi-scale
the
competency
timeline. There are some
architecture of nested
and
problem
some
solving
other
in diverse problem spaces.
of my own. I am
those
putting
diverse
together
problem
a add
spaces
around
are
augmentation.
morphological states,
Because I have some of my own
transcriptional states,
and
genetics,
but I'm not gonna. I don't want to take it.
behavioral
People want to
states,
write for this period.
states,
So that's something that anybody who wants to be named.
physiological states.
But I think also just having a general whatever, putting it on my lab,
Basically, William James's definition of
whether it's
intelligence
frontier
is
math or
the
some
ability to reproduce
anybody
the
can
same goal by
like
different
doing the
means.
publicity of the
And
blog,
the
my
type of
own
goals
variations. I might have
it
to ask a couple
investigates
consistent
is
iterative things.
are like morphological goals,
And I feel like this is a great way to talk
anatomical
about
goals. endpoints of
demo
the development of the
like
creature.
this concept. It's something that we talked about a lot.
So he looks at how creatures can reach those anatomical goals
I think for people who are
despite
not as intimidated, just
external
like super
and internal
very
perturbations.
obvious, having to do
They
it.
can reach those goals through diverse starting points and via different
Google,
tasks.
which is very software
Oriented. At one point, he uses
but sort of just the iteration process.
So would you want us to email that to you today,
very
Jesse?
specific, where you have like a checkpoint that the system is
Great.
trying to
But next
return
part
to.
of I'll make sure that
I'll
make sure that you
And in this, that set point is
whatever they call
describing a
it.
particular anatomy. So he basically looks
There's
at
no
like
particular rush.
in what ways
Uh,
you can mess
there's
with
been a
the
bunch of
creature and
things.
like still like
Put
end
out
up in the right
article. You don't know, like,
endpoint.
just
And that's
something to
seems
be. I actually wanted to hashtag.
most of his research
There's
is.
not been even more time yet.
And
Not
he
that
so he
might
uses
know
his
you.
research on
I found a nice
bioelectricity,
Avery found a nice one. I think it was
bioelectric
who knows
information
you can be found.
as an example of this kind of intelligence.
That's sort of like the one about analogies. That's the ecological condition metaphor. That looks really cool.
But the main,
The ones that were mentioned
yeah, the main
anyway,
goal is that,
so
or the main point is that
sit down and
intelligence.
I
Yeah,
would
I
like
think that's
that
great.
a
And
weekend.
we'll talk in a little bit maybe about the VR stuff because I have some ideas about what you can cover. And, yeah, so I wanted to get to Amanda and Himanshu first.
I still want to try to
So I guess we can go with Amanda first. Did you have things on 11 that you want to talk
Is that
about?
how? Could you say a little more about that, or like how he introduced that in the talk? It's possible.
Cell intelligence,
That, like,
archetypal, and morphological what you want to be.
Like the green
that's
is saying
I
all
went into
intelligence
it not
is
knowing what a
collective
morphological
intelligence.
space was.
I'm very happy
so
with
now I
that.
think I understand.
There's also some overlap between
His main
gorillas
point, all cases
and,
that all intelligence
plot twisters.
speaking as collective intelligence.
We're having
in
regular
biology,
meetings and plot twisters.
Emergent biology,
Avery, Jenny,
multi-scale complex from the architecture of nested problem solvers in diverse
trying to
problem
flesh out
spaces. And that's
their-
not just
Jenny got
those
into
diverse
the
problem
studio.
spaces are in the world, morphological space, morpho-transcriptional space, so you're on the genetic level, 3D/behavioral space, so like, but all of that is like our
connected life with
intelligence in the sense that there are goals, physiological space, in a variety of
She wants to flesh out part of the map of Twisterland,
it's
which is
adaptive.
like the
Uses
plan.
basically William James's
You
definition
go
of
through
intelligence,
like
the
the cards and
obstacles, the same goal by
part of their
different
like
means.
the story
type of
of
goals
stuff. She's working on that. But
Investigate
we're also like there's a lot of
are like morphological goals.
That's good.
Like
It's I think
anatomical
that's good.
goals.
And I also when he brought that up, I assume it was towards the start of it. But like was he on some of what we're talking about?
So
I'm also
he looks at
I'm asking him sort of like from a
creatures
presentation. These are external
reach
prompts.
those
Did
anatomical
he
goals.
mention it? No, I'll just watch the thing too.
External
So,
and internal
if you don't
perturbations.
if you don't know the whole questions that make sense, don't worry about it. That might just be my
Starting
question.
point.
The second, because I'm curious how he does like perspective. When he introduces
At
that as
one
a
point he
concept,
uses
is it sort of like becoming aware of a lot of overlap?
It's like homeostasis.
Or I'm kind of
where
putting
you have
he
like a
introduces
set
it as a
point
framework under
that's
which
trying
the
to
diplomat
return
role
to.
up in the rest of his presentation through that point.
And
I assume it's more
in
for
this,
the latter,
that set point
but I
is
don't know how he talks
describing a
about it.
particular anatomy.
But
Intelligence basically looks at like a collective. In what ways?
Yeah.
I'd say that was like a main point. Get a slide of it still like points and that
Voice
top
in
of
the
that
room.
point.
Okay, yeah,
And
okay,
that seems to be, like,
that's what
what
I'm. Avery's, I think Avery's.
Most of his research.
I would have guessed that. And I'll look at it first because I think that I really like that, and I genuinely consider that. So I might say more about that later.
Information.
Anything else you want to
As
say
an
about
example of this kind of intelligence.
that role? And it's interesting. It's a very interesting thing.
I took a screenshot. The main,
definitely
the main
sort of a
goal
side
is that
project. Everything else
the
is
main
like
one other
is
thing that I
consistent.
found very interesting and really robust is that it exists in these different
people are invited to
uses
join that
findings
sometime.
and like
It's just
findings
I like
of bioelectric
heavily weighted and did
patterns,
he being able to attend to it. So when he brought this up in the
endogenous
talk,
bioelectric
but it's going well.
patterns, basically the information on this morphological level that allows
Is that how? Could you say a little more about that, or like how he introduced that in
use
the
those
talk?
concepts to
Like,
sorry,
is that like-
our definition of self is like what you want to call it.
But I'm saying all intelligence
like-
is collective intelligence. And outside of that,
Yeah, the self is like defined by
Yeah,
the
next
type of
week's
goals
gonna be
that like all creature is capable of, like the
annoying.
intelligent behavior
I don't
and being,
want. I've had so much stuff in my life. I just want to be
which is like
stay in one
flexible,
place, read a lot of papers,
emergent
that's what I'm
from
looking
some
for. That's
flexible
what I want to
boundary
do.
from the
In reality,
activity of
it's
like
gonna
some
be like
systems.
one thing,
defined by like this
and
that scale
I think
of goals.
I would really
Behavior,
enjoy
like
trying to
in,
talk
in the
about
world
this.
and the environment,
Maybe
behavior
Behavior
to
Friday.
the morpho space,
In the next
which
few days.
on the
I
genetic
have the
side, sure.
opportunity on Thursday.
Maybe, but all of that, I would
do
have
a
to get a better
presentation
understanding of
at
intelligence in the sense that there are goals
another
that
group
can
I'm
be
working
reached.
with.
And what we
Yeah,
like, I don't know, the
about VR
bioelectricity stuff was very, and it's adaptive when he was making like grand
I
philosophical
wouldn't mind
goals
getting
or reach
some
base
pointers
sites.
from
So,
that.
I
I'm
was
gonna
like,
try
well,
to ask.
maybe.
I know Morgan's really good about sharing some
Maybe someone with
connections
more,
and stuff.
that was my best understanding.
Knowledge.
Knowledge.
I actually think. I told I reached out to. I've been very curious about that. When you brought it up, I assume it was towards the start of philosophy group, but like was he like I'm also asking almost like from a presentational perspective. Like DCI. I've been really curious about the part. I think in the 11. If you don't know how to round up. If I was kind of hoping the nitty gritty nuts and bolts, and obviously bioelectricity, I said I'm very aware of. He introduces it. Is it sort of like customer service? Like what's the stuff that's happening that we know is happening? He introduces it as a framework under which he's talking about representation, genetic things. I assume it's sort of observable physical issues and say what can we know about
A collective.
which is totally like
I don't think they're quite deep show the ultimate like. And that was the top.
I kind of wanted to say very okay. That's what I'm from like a Thursday philosophical take. I would have guessed that, and I'll look at it. I really like that, and I really hope for that. So I might say more about that in a minute. Get both. Anything else you want to say about the talk? This is some things to cover in what I'm going to talk about Thursday, because it's not. It was very much like like, hey, there's been some interesting things.
So one other thing
I guess I
found
have, well, a
very
couple things to
useful,
say about it.
is that
Yeah, I think that's a very good summary,
uses
first of all.
findings
Thank
in
you for that. I like, we put things in the channels. I like it when people go through and actually evaluate it and, give some feedback on it, because that's always will lead to other things. So, yeah, I think the definition of intelligence, William James.
He says that
So, this definition of intelligence that we're going to see later in the meeting, that people are thinking about these things in different areas. They're going to have different definitions of intelligence, and even things like language. So it's like nice to have that definition right up front. And
So it's kind of
this reminded me of kind of the stuff that we're talking about with respect to neutral evolution.
there's ways to approach
Some of these evolutionary pathways.
Sometimes you have an opportunity.
In fact, people there's a whole literature. People were kind of making the comparison
ways to approach that
between like learning
effective.
and evolution and
You
adaptation
can
and plasticity.
especially like
And there's a large, there's a very strong interest in then a life, in the artificial life
demo
community,
deploy isn't just like,
where people build models and they kind of simulate, these different types of simulations to come up with
turning out stuff all the time.
different ways to look at this. But also, people are kind of looking, biologists are looking at systems that sort of straddle all of
I
this.
refer
So you have systems that evolve and they develop and they have plasticity and they exhibit plasticity, and then they also learn, and then people are trying to figure out the right time scale for that. So, sometimes learning is like within a generation.
I've been
So
really
you
curious
learn
about
something, and then you have offspring, and those offspring have to learn something, and then they have offspring. But then, there's of course cultural evolution.
Very aware of
You have these things that you fix, these rituals or lessons that you kind of pass on to different generations, so they don't have to relearn everything over and over, and you pass them on. Sometimes in insects and in other animals, even in humans to some extent, you have things that are innate. So you have these innate things that kind of come up, at different points in development where, like we are able to develop our intelligence. We don't have to develop it. We develop our intelligence over development. We kind of gain faculties as we go through development, but we don't have to start from zero. When we have a new generation, they have these abilities that that's great. If you have I guess I have, sufficient development. I think that's a very good summary, first of all. Thank you for that. So these are things that, there's a lot of, we put things in the channels, and I'm thinking through and actually evaluate it examples, give some feedback on it, because it's always where you have lead to other things. All these things coming together. So yeah, I think the definition of intelligence, William James. So I think that's interesting. Intelligence is defined as single later meaning that. So that means that you have a similar goal, different definitions of intelligence in the world, and even things like language presupposes agency. So it's like evolution had the definition of agency. We presuppose that you have. This reminded me of an agent that is adapting to their environment with respect to other things. And there's the behavior of the agent, but it's separate.
So would you want us to email that to you today,
there's
Jesse?
literature, where cases like learning is very much between learning agency-driven and evolution. So like the adaptation, can be made plasticity. Also for like plasticity, there's sometimes large. Depends on the context. There's a very strong interest in then A-life, development, for example, where people build models and they there's an epigenetic these different types of simulations to do that with. There are different ways to look at this mechanisms, but also, people are kind of looking shorter scale and biologists genetic evolution. Like if that's sort of straddles, like starvation, you have systems that evolve in your lifetime. They have plasticity in a couple generations, exhibit plasticity, and they also learn a protective mechanism. And then people are trying to figure out the right adaptation for that, even in evolution. So sometimes learning is like generation within a neuroprotective, because some other offspring protective mechanism that exists. So I wanted to get to there, so those, but then things have, there are a lot of different mechanisms that are different scales. You have these time, and so I mean, kind of bringing that all together is really hard. Lessons that, but when you approach from a theoretical different generation, so they don't have to relearn everything. Has this sort of, and you pass them on. Sometimes in insects, heavy and other animals. Even in humans to some extent, I don't want to babble things that are innate, but so you have these innate. Basically, the idea is that there's a lot there at different points. There's a lot of, I think, interesting philosophical questions. Like we are able to develop our intelligence. We don't have to develop. We could agents. We develop our intelligence over development. We kind of game. And you have to, but you have to figure out, like I said, like we don't exactly start from zero. Exactly how you when we have a new generation. Assume you can't just say, well, we have this generic agent. You have want to have like some mechanism development or sufficient development. But yeah, there's it's. I think that's great. That was a great talk. So these are morphospace stuff. There's a lot of stuff that he kind of intersection here, and I'm thinking there's a lot of stuff like morphospace examples, not necessarily. They've done this where you have oftentimes they'll do this. These things coming together, analysis and understanding types, how they work, and how they sort of parse out. So I think it's interesting. Intelligence is defined as singles by different variation. So that means that you have down to similar goal. You want to do something, and you want to know how did you get from presupposes agency. So now evolution, I don't presuppose agents. All these different we presuppose that. So you have people have hypothesized an agent space adapting to the multidimensional space that you have, and there's behavior of the agent, but it's separate from the evolution. You end up with the space of possibilities. Whereas in the case of like learning from the shall be agent, shall be agency driven. So like that distinction can be made, and also these changes plasticity. Sometimes as well, the organism moves across its space. They don't move intentionally across the space. Development is just an adaptive process. Maybe depending. Yeah, so there's an epigenetic. But you're decoupling all of those things, and you're just saying, I'm observing all these variants, and I'm trying to build a connected space. A shorter scale than pathways, genetic evolution to different phenotypes, experience, different morphologies. And then the question is, in your lifetime, how easy it is to get to those places. And so if you have like a cell that has like an adaptation, even in evolution, you have 25 valves and mechanisms that happens, and it's some sort of. It could be neuroprotective. That's a little bit different than your some other, protective. So the assumption is that it exists way out somewhere, and there, space. That is very hard. Those sorts of things. There are a lot of different mechanisms to get there, different scales, or like say of time and blind evolutionary. So I mean, kind of bringing it all together as a situation of learning. But when you approach from a theoretical, be an agent that would learn, and Michael Levin take a long time to get there. But then that's a different set of mechanisms. But it's and it may actually not be that far. Some of these other things for something. So I mean, I don't want to adaptive learning about this, but agency. Basically, the idea is that there's a lot so that space, there's a lot of, I think, interesting all these different variants that you're based out of there, all connected. And also, and the idea is you're accessing these different, so you can model these things, and you're saying, how do you get from point A to point B? And you have to, but you have to figure out, like I said, stepwise change through mutation. It could be some epigenetic. As soon as you can't just say, well, we have this generic agent that does. It could be like just learning about. To have like some, in AI we talk about composition. Where you're proposing a solution. Yeah, there's, and you don't. I think they have the solution until you put all those pieces. And the morphospace stuff, this is stuff that he was made up with complex traits. There's a lot of stuff like morphospaces, for example. They've done this expressed as a oftentimes they'll do this. So that's analysis of all these steps, especially when you end up in this at this endpoint show, and then you're like at some point in the where they'll have like a bunch of variation. You can say that you went down the beach. There's this point A to point B. And you want to know how did you get phenotype, like say some precursor models, and it gets their basic design down shell, and all these different variations. So people expressed until you get there's a space. So it's latent, multidimensional space. While these changes are happening, and once these changes are there, these changes that happen in different be expressed, and you end up with the space of possibility. So that's this concept from a shell being plain without visuals. That's kind of hard to understand on the show. There are some really nice visuals. All these changes that happen. Actually, Stephen Jay Gould, the organism moves across its space. They don't move as eventually across the space shells. It's just an adaptive process. Examples of this where you have, but you're decoupling different maps, those things. You're just saying, you can draw and observing all these. You don't need variables on it. You just kind of try to build a connected space. The landscape, basic pathways, and put different images there and say these are these different varieties. And then the question is and how easy it is. How easy is it to get to those places? That's a very interesting topic. You have like a shell that has like explored that, or it'd be really 25 valves in different places, and it's some sort of sphere. That's a little bit different than your typical shell that you would find on the beach. So the assumption is it's like way out somewhere in morphospace that is very hard to access. It takes a long time to get there through, like, say, blind evolutionary change. If you had a situation with learning, it would be similar. There'd be an agent that would learn things, and it would take a long time to get there. But then, that's a different set of mechanisms. But, and it may actually not be that far out for something like active learning, where you have agency. And so that space, that's an idea of all these different variants that you're observing, and they're all connected somehow. And the idea is you're accessing these different examples. And you're saying, how do you get from point A to point B? And it could be like, stepwise change through mutation. It could be some epigenetic mechanisms that get turned on in sequence. It could be like just learning about, in AI we talk about composition, where you're composing a solution, and you don't have the solution until you put all those pieces in place. And so this happens with complex traits as well, where you have these different things that have to be in place before it gets expressed as a coherent thing. So that's how you get to that place. You take all these steps, and you end up in this at this endpoint, and then you're at some point in the morphospace, and then you can say that, like, there's this point A to point B transformation of a phenotype or behavior, and it gets there by these steps, and sometimes it's not something that you see expressed until you get there. So it's latent, while these changes are happening, and then once these changes are in place, it happens to be expressed, and you can observe it. So that's this concept of morphospace. Without visuals, it's kind of hard to understand. There are some really nice visuals, and some, I think, actually Stephen Jay Gould talked a lot about it in his books, because he dealt a lot with mollusk shells and things, and he would do examples of this where, he'd have different maps of morphospace, and, you can draw them out. You don't need to put numbers on it. You can just draw a big, like, landscape, basically, and put images there and say, these are these different variants. Are they related? And, So I think that's
great.
that's a very interesting topic
Mitchell
for another
Resnick.
time.
I guess I have
a couple things to say. Intriguing, some things. Yeah, I think that's a very good summary. I think you developed something called Star Logo, which is I like we put things in the channels. I like it when people go through and actually evaluate it. And, give some feedback on it because it's always will lead to other things. I think the definition of intelligence, William James. This definition of intelligence that we're going to see later in the meeting that people are thinking about these things in different areas. They have different definitions of intelligence, and even things like language. So it's like nice to have that definition right up front. And this reminded me of kind of the stuff that we're talking about with respect to neutral evolution, some of these evolutionary pathways. In fact, people there's a whole literature where people are kind of making comparisons between like learning and evolution, and adaptation, and plasticity. And there's a large, there's a very strong interest in the A-life, in the artificial life community, where people build models and they kind of simulate, these different types of simulations to come up with different ways to look at this. But also, people are kind of looking, biologists are looking at systems that sort of straddle all of these. So you have systems that evolve and they develop and they have plasticity and they exhibit plasticity and then they also learn. And then people are trying to figure out the right time scale for that. So, sometimes learning is like within a generation. So you learn something and then you have offspring and those offspring have to learn something and then they have offspring. But then, there's of course cultural evolution where you have these things that you fix, these rituals or lessons that you kind of pass on to different generations. So they don't have to relearn everything over and over and you pass them on. Sometimes in insects and in other animals, even in humans to some extent, you have things that are innate. So you have these innate things that kind of come up, at different points in development where, like we are able to develop our intelligence. We don't have to develop it, we develop our intelligence over development. We kind of gain faculties as we go through development. But we don't have to start from zero when we have a new generation. They have these abilities that are, if you have a normal development or sufficient development, you can gain these faculties. And you can develop something called Star Logo. So these are things that there's a lot of intersection there. And I'm thinking more in terms of the real world examples, not necessarily theoretical examples, where you have all these things coming together and understanding how they work and how they sort of parse out. So I think that's interesting. Intelligence is defined as same goals by different means. So that means that you have a similar goal, you want to do something in the world, and that presupposes agency. Now, evolution, we don't presuppose agency. We presuppose that you have an agent that is adapting to their environment and their selection and their other things. And there's behavior of the agent, but it's separate from the evolutionary process. Whereas in the case of like learning, it's very much agency driven. So like that distinction can be made also for like plasticity sometimes as well. Depends on the context. But development, for example, other things. Yeah, so there's an epigenetic component to learning as well. Like we know that there are epigenetic inheritance mechanisms that operate on a sort of a shorter scale than genetic evolution. That are like if you experience like starvation. In your lifetime, it passes down a couple generations. It's supposed to be a protective mechanism. So in adaptation and even in evolution, there are a lot of protective mechanisms that happen. They can be neuroprotective or some other protective mechanism that exists, and they're so those sorts of things. There are a lot of different mechanisms and a lot of different scales of time. And so I mean, kind of bringing that all together is really hard. But when you approach from a theoretical approach, and Michael Levin has this sort of approach that he's developing, and it's very heavy on agency and some of these other things. So I mean, I don't want to babble on about this, but basically the idea is that there's a lot there. There's a lot of, I think, interesting philosophical questions that can be raised out of that, and also things that we can address with agents. So you can model these things, and you have to figure out, like I said, exactly what you want to model and exactly how you want to model it. Assume you can't just say, well, we have this generic agent that does all these things, and we want to have like some mechanism for it, and but yeah, I think that's great. That was a great talk. And the morphospace stuff, this is not stuff that he made up on his own. There's a lot of stuff on, like morphospaces, for example. They've done this. Oftentimes they do this in the analysis of phenotypes. So thank you, Sam. It was a great update. Please look into that more and let us know. Where they'll have like a bunch of variation that you can go down the beach and collect these different. So Himanshu, are you ready to go? You want to know how did you get from like say some precursor mollusk shell or a basic design for a mollusk shell to all these different variations? So people have hypothesized, well, there's a space, multi-dimensional space that you have. And there are these changes that happen in different dimensions, and you end up with the space of possibilities. So, you can move from a shell being plain to a shell being striped, to having the valve somewhere else on the shell, and then there are all these changes that happen, and the organism moves across in space. They don't move intentionally across the space. It's just an adaptive process, maybe depending on their environment. But you're decoupling all of those things, and you're just saying, I'm observing all these variants, and I'm trying to build a connected space where there are pathways to different phenotypes, different morphologies. And then the question is how easy is it to get to those places? So if you have like a shell that has like 25 valves in different places and it's some sort of sphere, that's a little bit different than your typical shell that you find on the beach. So the assumption is it's like way out somewhere in morphospace that is very hard to access. It takes a long time to get there through, like, say, blind evolutionary change. If you had a situation with learning, it would be similar. There'd be an agent that would learn things, and it would take a long time to get there. But then, that's a different set of mechanisms. But, and it may actually not be that far for something like active learning, where you have agency. So that space, that's an idea of all these different variants that you're observing, and they're all connected somehow. And the idea is you're accessing these different examples, and you're saying, how do you get from point A to point B? And it could be like, stepwise change through mutation. It could be some epigenetic mechanisms that get turned on in sequence. It could be like just learning about, in AI we talk about composition, where you're composing a solution, and you don't have the solution until you put all those pieces in place. And so this happens with complex traits as well, where you have these different things that have to be in place before it gets expressed as a coherent thing. So that's how you get to that place. You take all these steps. Thank you, Sam. That was a great update. And let's look into that more and add some out in the morphospace. And then you can say that, like, there's this point A transformation of a phenotype or a behavior. And it gets there by these steps, and sometimes it's not something that you see expressed until you get there. So it's latent, yes, while these changes are happening, and then once these changes are in place, it happens to be expressed, and you can observe it. So that's this concept of morphospace. Without visuals, it's kind of hard to understand. There are some really nice visuals, and some, I think, actually Stephen Jay Gould talked a lot about it in his books, because he dealt a lot with mollusk shells and things, and he would do examples of this where he'd have different maps of morphospace, and you can draw them out. You don't need to put numbers on it. You can just draw out a big, like, landscape basically, and put images there and say these are these different variants, are they related? And so I think that's a very interesting topic for another time. I think if we explored that a bit more, it'd be really intriguing. Some of the things we could.
Papers I read, which Brian also shared, states rewards, action, etc. So it will take into account some factors like activities, relationships, and shared resources, and which that promotes what the agent gets community and become then there is a transition factor. And the main thing is to incorporate these features and turn these factors into transition between can be like automated given an action. And then there is a reward function. So the main thing about the reward function is that ML training method, the reward main part is to maximize the expected project. Reinforcement learning agent is able to perceive. So and it also has a set of observations and through trial and error, set of joint observations. It is different from other ML approaches because observation problem learning from direct interaction with this environment. This is the discount factor. And the kind of reinforcement discount factor is basically it captures things that are further in the future, like that we might reinforcement learning, so in terms of part of the problems, we can basically think of it as the environment would be like open source community to the other agents might be the project members, like the environment, the states and the states of the environment will depend on that. We can have multiple agents by the agent. That can be in a single environment, and there can be multiple rewards for the environment, etc. Agents, so the reward system will be like positive or negative feedback. These will also in terms of MARL, like loop, there are depending on the action the agent will take. It can be a centralized setting. This reward centralized setting with network agents to get underworldly decentralized setting. So in a centralized setting, we can have a central controller, communication code, backcode, which has a local policy that is shareable, and it also shareable observations between agents. And the system also gives observation for the agents. And the decentralized system, we can see that the agents are communicating with each other. And there is a feedback, the observations are shared with the regulator, gives ethical action. And in fully decentralized application, there is no communication at all. And it is like every agent is, so this feedback loop is kind of where I'm trying to get at, along with these two examples. So decentralized setting is like a block diagram which can be like the life cycle of what we can think of as a starting point for this problem. It might be different in technology, this is where decentralized form of it comes in. And the idea is to take this was, I think, like one of the papers I read with Ryan was also shared
for education.
A similar idea of decentralized form. This is the basically the code 7 tables where idea is to take adapt inspiration from this and try to create an environment to choose from, which can serve as a transition function interaction, which is basically transition to the next state will be the probability and the transition basically an example of given an action open source project in the form of project, there is a reward function. So the main thing about the reward function is that empowerment is directly related to communication. Like the main part is to maximize the expected communication grounded some of the software and a good project in a nutshell. Yeah, so it also has a set of observations for agents.
Well, it's a really reduction
since it is a multi-agent system, is a set of concepts will revolve around collective reinforcement factor. And collective is the discount factor is basically captures the collective for the part like that we might not care less about. This is like the intelligence of
I don't
think of it as environmentally like initiators or a project is the agents might be the project members like contributors, the reward signal, like states of the environment will depend on the reward.
This actually ties
taken by the agent or that's the maximize the common reward. or communication like the environment, factors of collective and the reward system such as eligibility and positive or negative feedback of RL agents. So learn to act collect depending on the action the under the influence of a global trusted RL to maximize may also turn out good parallel experimental data as neuroscientists consider to unravel the communication reward backward and so this was kind of
David saying, I think we're
interesting
genuinely
point
seeing
that I
this
came
kind of AI
in
technology emerge
RL
in real
book by
time. Actually start to believe that
first is the ethical
the
regulator. The next part is agent-based regulator, and there is a
Dali
system. The
to
main objective here is
speaker
to
collaboration.
there is a
And what I'm saying by
by
that is
generating correct output data. Ethical regulator gives ethical actions and these are some of the models on like local regulated
there's a lot of
to the ethical regulator. So these are
really grasp
kind of where I'm trying to get
that's not a bad thing. That's like that's how we do it.
This is like a rough diagram which can be like first life cycle of interesting basic open source learning or generation. So it might be different in different cases. But the basic summary of this model is that it is an agent model to take that's relates member motivation and contribution in a conversation based in also part of the community. And so a lot of open source interactions are also applications that are related to the project such as the code and out etc. And the idea is to take the inspiration from this and try to create an environment and can make systems to serve as a backbone to messages based on perceived benefits and costs of doing so. And the next so like it can be used to run virtual experiments to develop theories about project in the form of project online communities and so
maybe this is the goal. See if this model is better, but
empowerment
that's
directly
definitely part
related
of
to
it.
communication.
But I think there's a little bit of
the main idea is that
I think it's here but outside of in the real world, I think there's a lot
and the goal is to create an agent-based model inspired by all these above. Since it is a multi-agent system, it will take into account concepts will revolve around collective reinforcement and collaborator and collective is the point.
Yeah.
If there's any other thoughts about this,
Since it's a collective, part of the other aspects of the project is sector data as validation. So, any large open source community initiative or project is a goal-based model.
Sorry, I was late. My sister's graduating high school today, so I helped her get ready. And then, like, a half hour and everything to go for graduation. But so my update is I've done a little bit more research, not as much for the life
mailing data is one of
but I
the
did last week's meeting when we were talking about
under the influence
like
of
VR and AR stuff. I was thinking about it a bit, but I remember talking about it and doing research on how it affects sign language and other languages that way. So I got back into looking
that I came across.
research
So these are some of the data factors like which we can focus on. Part is agent-based communication. So the main objective is a form of validate the system model by generating correct output data.
I'm going to be talking about another group I'm working with.
These are some of the models on
about.
Thank you. That was very good. A lot of things to think about there, and like I think you've got a good flow, and you know kind of where you want to go now. So I guess the next step is sort of validating the DECPOM DP model,
or facilitating
the basic
building
summary
some
of
sort
this
of
model is
version of that and
agent-based
testing it
model
out.
and
etc.
relates member motivation and contribution in a conversation based that's what I'm working on. So a lot of open source interactions are getting some form of working projects such as bugs, issues, general doubts, etc.
Yeah.
And in this simulation, individual agents
this kind of goes back to the previous conversation. Yeah, please look into that more and let us objectives.
Perceived benefits
So
and costs of doing so.
sort of a lot of potential goals and objectives that you're ready to go
run
to
virtual experiments to
and you
develop
shouldn't necessarily assume that they're all
in online
sort of
communities and to
common.
inform the
Like people have
design
different
of
goals and
real-life
things.
online communities.
And this is one of the problems with this area, and you
but
kind of have to
the
make a
main
decision.
idea is that
And that is,
we can
you
take
know,
inspiration
do I
from all
want
these
to do?
previous.
Do I want to take everything into
So
account? Do I
like
want to take
the
all the possible
previous
goals
goal
into
is
account?
like a short
Or do I just want to assume that there's certain goals that override others?
some ideas.
So what I mean is that, you know, I'm trying to get to is here is that you could set this up as a very, what they call multi-objective problem, which is where you just have all these different objectives that you want to satisfy. But the problem, of course, there is that it's way too computationally complex, and it wouldn't necessarily give you a better answer than just kind of assuming one or two different goals or objectives. So, you know, that's something you want to think about. Like, when you think about abstracting the problem, you say, what is the most important goal? And then, you know, if we can get it down to like a very simple version of that, then we can work from there. Maybe scale it up a little bit if we think that that's not really giving us interesting results or, you know, truthful results. So, you know, I would say start simply with respect to that and then move up a little bit. But yeah, there is this, I know we talked about goals, and, you know, there is the aspect of like assuming that the system has a goal when in fact it doesn't. And this applies to the collective intelligence that, you know, sometimes there's no overarching goal. Sometimes, for example, in insect colonies, the insects are doing their thing, and they're doing this locally, and then, you know, you have enough locales, they end up forming very good larger collectives. So, for example, there's a lot of things to think about insects. Like, I think you've got a good insect flow and model of the swarm, you know, kind of where you want to go now. Go to make this swarm. So I guess the next step not is sort of maybe eliminating or something, but in, you know, in the agent's mind, it's just like building some sort of thing, that version of that all the other agents are doing. Is that correct? And it's not, you know, it's, I guess in that sense it's homogeneous behavior, homogeneous behavior. But it's basically doing this in parallel is the key. And so, you know, this will be interesting. If you make the assumption that all the behaviors, you know, are homogeneous, this kind of goes back to, you can end up with some pretty complex behaviors and collective objectives. So that's something to think about. Sort of, yeah. So I definitely potential goals and objectives here. And you shouldn't necessarily. I like that you've sort of exploring this common, you know, like people have different goals more. Because I know Brian, this is one of the problems like this in his presentation. You kind of have to make a decision, and that is, and I don't know, Brian, do I want to do? Do I want to take everything into account? Do I want to take all the possible goals into account? Or do I just want to assume that there's certain goals that override others? So what I mean is that, you know, I'm trying to get to is here is that you could set this up as a very, what they call multi-objective problem, which is where you just have all these different objectives that you want to satisfy. But the problem, of course, there is that it's way too computationally complex, and it wouldn't necessarily give you a better answer than just kind of assuming one or two different goals or objectives. So, you know, that's something you want to think about. Like, when you think about abstracting the problem and saying, what is the most important goal? And then, you know, if we can get it down to like a very simple version of that, then we can work from there. Maybe scale it up a little bit. If we think that that's not really giving us interesting results or, you know, truthful results. So, you know, I would say start simply with respect to that and then move up a little bit. But yeah, there is this, I know we talked about goals, and, you know, there is the aspect of like assuming that the system has a goal when in fact it doesn't. And this applies to collective intelligence that, you know, sometimes there's no overarching goal. Sometimes, for example, in insect colonies, the insects are doing their thing, and they're doing this locally. And then, you know, you have enough locales, they end up forming these larger collectives. So, for example, there's a swarm of insects. Do the insects all have a lot of swarm in their head when they go to
That
make
makes
this
sense.
swarm?
is a set of
Probably not.
observation problem accessing.
Maybe in a movie or
And
something,
this
but
is the discount factor.
in the
And,
agent's mind, it's
discount
just like
factor
I
is
was wondering if
basically,
this area was screening
it
it, all
captures
the other
things
agents
that
are
are
using.
further in the future, like that
And
we
it's
might
not, you know,
not care
I
less
guess in
about.
that sense that's homogeneous
So in
behavior,
terms of
homogeneous
our problems,
behavior.
we can think of
But
it
it's
as
basically
environment
doing
like
this where you have the 8, I
the
think, and
agents might be the
so
project members.
you know this will
like
be interesting.
contributors,
Okay, so
maintainers,
yeah, this is a nice
the state
all
of
the
the environment
behaviors.
will
So
depend
this
on
this
that.
shows the homogeneous regulator on the
Taken
left.
by
And
the
you can
agent
end up with some pretty
that can be
complex
in form of
behaviors, these
contribution
big
to code
categories, collective
or
behaviors.
communication
So that's
to
and
the
then something
environment,
you have
etc.
about and
And
yeah,
the
so I
response
definitely
system
think you're on the right
will
track
be like
where you have the
positive
little
or
model of
negative
the
feedback
source
loop.
community.
Looks good, and I
And
like that
then,
you've
you're exploring this
Depending on the
desktop
action the
sort of a
agent
software engineering
and
more because I know
this
Brian
reward
model
system
you're
is what
showing
you have to
us these
maximize to
presentations
get
sort
to a
of
particular solution.
what you're doing. So the
And I don't know,
the
Brian,
open
whether
source
it's
community
Like
model in the middle is like the
I
human,
really
and
appreciate
like what the humans are doing, sort of technically,
I love
and then the on the right is like the project management part, where you have these different features and you're saying on a roadmap, how are we completing the roadmap? So I like this, and I take it that you're going to sort of integrate these, or at least parts of these, into some sort of unified model.
So the feedback loop is kind of where I'm trying to get at, along with these two examples. Because this is like a rough diagram which can be like the life cycle of a basic open source project. Like
Yeah, I think that's great.
But this is like a generalized
So
version of
yeah,
it.
yesterday at
And
the
the idea is
contributor
to take
summit,
this,
I think there were some pretty good
community
talks
contributor,
on, like, you know, there was stuff I was learning
part of the community
from
and
this.
the
And you know, they had a lot of nice. I think they had a lot of nice perspectives there, going from like licensing to you know, some of these things were collaborating, and you're joining a project, and you know, some people were talking about time management. How do they find time to contribute? Others are talking about, you know, some of these other issues about contributing in different ways that are code. So yeah, I think that's definitely, you know, this is nice that we're able to break this down into a very practical sort of way of thinking about this. So the ethical regulator is very theoretical and very high level in terms of the concepts, but mapping it down to like what people are doing, like activity model, where you're like, okay, now, if I'm gonna, my purpose here is to make some contribution to a software, or sometimes it's just to build a piece of software. I was wondering if you could share your screen. I wanted to like visualize. I don't necessarily think that every one contributor says, "I'm gonna make this software better." Sometimes it's just like, I want to do this. I think it's a slide. It's where you have the 8. I think I don't like the way it works. Or I might find okay, so yeah, this is a nice slide. So there are ways that, you know, so this shows you how people think about this, but this is, I think, mapping it to these, you know, different contributors, what they're doing, purpose and truth, and then mapping through that. And then you have the sort of the instantiation where you have the little model of the open source community, and so yeah, and then so that's good to have a software, you know, and again, you know, I know the model where I mentioned a lot of things, steps. Yesterday's meeting is very you're doing. So think about all the ways the open source community model in the middle is like the humans, like what the humans are doing, sort of technically, yes. And then the on the right is like the project management part, where you have these different features and you're saying on a roadmap. So did we have any other? How are we completing So I like this, and I take it that you're going to sort of integrate these, or at least parts of these, into some sort of unified model, correct?
Because like I wanted to, I'll mainly talk about this first model right to get something together. The link dot simulation.
Yeah, I think that's great.
The basic summary of
So
this model
yeah, yesterday at
is an
the
agent-based
contributor
model
summit,
that simulates
I think there were some pretty good talks
and contribution in the conversation
there was stuff I was
online
learning
right now, everybody's
from this.
everybody's
So a lot of open source
And they had a lot of nice. I think they had a lot of nice perspectives there, going from like licensing to
and in this
some of these things where
simulation,
you're collaborating
agents imitate members in an online
and
community
you're
and can
joining a
use
project,
technology
and some people were
and post
talking about
messages
time
based
management.
on perceived
How do they
benefits and
find time
costs
to
of that.
contribute?
If you look back
Others were
at the video,
talking
So,
about
it can
some of these
be,
other issues
used to run
about
virtual experiments to develop
contributing
data
in
about
different
individual
ways
behavior
that are
in
code.
online communities.
So yeah, I
and
think
to
that's
inform the
definitely
design of real-life online
this is nice that we're able to break this down into a very practical
the main idea
sort
is
of way
that,
of thinking
we,
about
we
this. So
take
the
we can
ethical
take inspiration
regulator
from all these
is very
previous
theoretical
models
and very high level in
into the
terms of the
problem statement,
concepts.
and the goal is to
Mapping it
create
down
an
to like what
agent-based
people
model
are doing,
inspired by
like
all these above models.
activity model where
And
we're like, okay,
it will take
now if
into
I'm gonna,
account
my
factors
purpose
like
here is to
communication
make
between vendors,
some contribution with
collaborators,
software.
teamwork leading
Or
to
sometimes it's just to
knowledge
build a
transfer.
piece of software. It depends
you
on,
actually get to fully
like,
play out.
I don't
One of
necessarily
the
think
other
that every one
aspects of the
contributor
project
says,
is open source
I'm going to make
data
the
as
software
validator.
better.
So
Sometimes it's just
net
like, I
logo,
want to do this one little thing,
it is an alternative
because
to the
I don't
logo
like it. I
agent-based
don't like the way it
concept.
works.
So open source data as
Or
validator.
I might find this useful for my immediate
So
goals. So there are
open
ways
source
that,
data can be, like,
that
you can
people
data
think about
scraping
this,
from
but
GitHub, like,
I think
there
mapping
is
it to
GitHub
these,
API, and
different
that
contributors and
also
what
has
they're doing, and then
a way
mapping
to
through that
take
process is very
information in
useful.
form of
It's very
data.
good.
And a lot of open source communities
Yeah,
use
so keep
mailing
working
lists.
on this, and I know we
So,
have our
mailing
meeting
data
on it,
is
so
one
yeah,
of
Friday.
the
So that's good
getting
to
mailing
talk
data
about in
can
this
also
meeting.
be
And again,
a
I
part
know they,
of
and then I did mention a lot of things at yesterday's
Work
meeting.
on
I was very
contribution
encouraged with
contribution-centric
Mick
data.
Ashby. Think about all the ways, and I
Extract
think it
meaningful
was pretty good kind of
information
approach
like
to
project
open
growth,
source. But there are some mentioning
contribution
this
growth,
themes here.
contribution
Oh, you were going to share your
experience,
screen,
and
Jesse?
contribution quality.
And so yeah, this is definitely good.
So
Okay,
these
so
some,
thank
these are
you,
some of
Himanshu,
the
for sharing your
data
screen.
factors like which we can focus on. Uh,
So did we have any other
to get some
comments from?
form
So
of
yeah, we'll
Jesse
follow up on the Mick Ashby stuff. And he
so,
Brian
these are
shared
some of
a
my
newer
thoughts
paper by
on
Mick
it,
Ashby
and thank you.
in I think one of the channels on. Thank you. That was very good. And some of the newer thoughts that he's had. A lot of things to think about. What did he mention? Like I think you've got a good flow. Maybe you mentioned that. Kind of where you want to go. Thursday's meeting.
Yeah,
So I guess the next step is
I
sort
found
of
this paper just
validating
super fascinating as
the
somebody who loves
DECPUM
Heinz von
DP
Forster.
model.
Back
He
in
basically takes
Or building some sort of
those of you who
version
don't
of
know
that
Forster's
and
work,
testing it out. Is
he's
that
kind of
correct?
the
a while ago.
progenitor of this
was
idea
really cool
of
to
second
see.
order cybernetics.
Yeah,
right now,
that's what I'm
everybody
working on
being
currently.
observed, and then the observer
Getting
observing the
some
observer
form
observing,
of working
et cetera,
model,
so on and so forth.
like the abstract.
So Ashby
Yeah.
takes von Forster to
Yeah,
task.
this kind of goes back to the
Look, it's all well
previous
and good
conversation
talking
we had
about
about goals and
but what we need
objectives.
now that our
so
understandings of
there's
systems are more
sort of a
complex
lot of
than they were when
potential
Forster
goals
was
and
kind of
objectives
formulating
here in the
these
communities.
is we need a model.
And you shouldn't necessarily assume that they're all
not
sort of
observer-centric.
common. Like people have different
Because the
goals.
observer
And,
now is
and
kind
this is
of
one of the
my
problems with this
interpretation of Ashby's work,
area, and you
that
kind of
the
have to make a
observer
decision.
is assumed.
And that
That
is,
it's like, of course,
you
there's
know,
an observer.
do I
You know,
want
we're all
to do?
humans talking
Do I
to
want to
each other.
take
We're all-
everything into
they're
account? Do I want
humans
to take
constructing
all the
these systems.
possible
The
goals
observer
into
can
account,
pretty much
or
assume.
do I just want to assume that there's certain
Again,
goals
that's
that
my
override
interpretation. He doesn't
others?
say that.
So what I mean is that I'm trying to get to is here is
what we
that
need is a more of a model.
you could set this up as a very
So that's
what they call
why
multi-objective
I
problem,
think your idea
which is
of
where you just have all these different objectives that you want to
reinforcement learning
satisfy.
might
But the
be
problem,
really,
of course,
how
there
much
productive
is that it's way
approach
too
to the problem.
computationally complex,
But
and
I
it
know
wouldn't
that's
necessarily
kind of
give
what
you a
happened
better
with
answer.
he kind of ends up with
Than just kind of
ethical
assuming one or
regulator
two different
we've been talking
I
about
have
for
a
a while.
goals or
And says,
objectives.
okay, so imagine a
So
regulator.
that's
Simplifies
something you
the
want to
model
think
to
about.
have
Like
purpose
when
at the
you
top,
think about
and
abstracting
then
the problem
one
and say,
chain going
what is the most
out
important
is
goal?
the,
and then
intelligence
if we
aspect
can
of
get it
things,
down
so
to
the-
like a
maybe
very
the
simple
decision-making process
version of
then
that,
enables a control.
then we can work from
Yeah,
there.
so
and
keep
keep
working
working
on
on
this,
this,
and
and
on the
I know
other
we,
side,
if
we
we think
have,
that that's
you
not
know, so
Fridays,
purpose
or
and
giving us
intelligence
interesting
that
talk
tells
results
control what
meeting
to
as
do.
well.
And then on the other side,
Truthful
purpose
results. And then I did get Brian. I would say start simply his cut with respect to conversation. Move up a little bit, Ashby, so we can move up on that.
No,
but yeah, there is this. I know we talked about goals. Mentioning this, there is the aspect of like assuming that the system has a goal when in fact it doesn't, and this applies to the collective intelligence. That sometimes there's no overarching goal. Sometimes, so yeah, we'll follow up with the Mick Ashby stuff. The insects doing their thing. Brian Sherlock doing this local Mick Ashby, and then in revenue locales, they end up forming these larger. Some of the newer thoughts that he's swarmed
with their own model.
What did he mention that he's moved on to the insects and how maybe he mentioned swarm in his head when they Thursday's meeting make this? Probably not. Maybe in a movie or something, but in the agent's mind, it's just like it's doing this thing that all the other agents are doing, and it's not. I guess in that sense, it's homogeneous behavior, but it's basically doing this in parallel. And so, this will be interesting if you make the assumption that all the behaviors, are homogeneous in the model. You can end up with some pretty complex behaviors, collective behaviors. So that's something to think about. And yeah, so I definitely think you're on the right track with this.
We need a model.
Yeah, it looks good, and I like that you're exploring this DEC POM DP model more, because I know Brian brought it up, and it was like, this is a nice presentation. And, and I don't know, Brian, what are your thoughts on
humans talking to each other? We're all
well, I guess I find that also interesting, this idea, and this is the way I always thought of different orders of regulation, was that first order would be just a simple feedback to the last element, so it's like element forward and then back. A second order would be going back further, like a further referent back in the system, so it could be like two different elements back, so it's not the thing that the feed forwards come in from, it's further back, and then the third order and so forth would just go further back. It almost is like reference or reference in like language, or maybe in a historical system where you're going back multiple steps, and it's not just the direct feedback. So it would be like if I had a system where you had people reviewing a paper, right, or reviewing a document, and you had it sequentially. So you had one person review it, then the next person, and I think you've heard of this old model of like if you pass a message around, people will modify it slightly so that if you're in a circle, so that when it comes back around to you, it sounds quite different than the original message that you passed forward in the group. So I'm sitting here, I pass a message to Jesse, he passes it to Amanda, pass it to Brian, and so forth. By the time it gets back to me, you've modified it slightly and retelling it, and I hear a different story. Now imagine that in a linear fashion, where it's like, we have go from like myself to like the last person, Samantha, to tell it, and then Samantha sends a feedback back to me, and then that feedback is not exactly matching the feed forward that I sent. Because I was wondering if you could share your screen again. So now you have this distorted sort of feedback that is, it's going to give you a different answer, say, than the first order feedback, which would be immediate. I think it would be like if I told where you have Jesse this story, and he gave me feedback on what his what he heard. Yeah, this is a nice his version of it was. So this shows you, we could coordinate that quite well. It wouldn't be a problem, but if I send it to a number of intermediaries, and then I get the message back, you have feedback, sort of the instantiation, and I have to figure out how to put that together. When you think about that, and then maybe, I just use that simple message software engineering example. But if you had like a document showing track change steps, sort of what you're doing. So this is like open source community model in the middle. Is that I guess I find that humans are doing this sort of this is the way I always thought of and then it gives more advice. Right, is like the project. So first order would be just a simple feedback to the last element, observes this element, and you have other observers back, pass on a second order, which I like this for this, like, and I take it, then I get back sort of integrate representation back, or at least parts of these different elements into some sort of, I can't understand. Okay, Jesse's a people, it's coming from it's harder for me to understand what its representation is. It almost, it's not like we might call shared representation or referent. It's different. In like now you could build a shared representation system by having like you're going back. I think that's great. All these different ages. So it's not just yesterday direct feedback. Getting this common. I think there was some really good talks drawing from a system where there's stuff I was learning. People reviewing a paper. That's reviewing a document. They had a lot of maybe sequentially. You had one person going from the next person to the next person.
I think so too.
And I think some of these things model operating. If you pass a message around and you're people join a project, some people are talking about time management, so that when it comes back around to you, find time to contribute. Others are talking about some of these other issues about in the group. So I'm contributing in different ways. Yeah, it's a heterogeneity issue. So I think that's definitely so forth. Your agent, time it gets back to me, they can be homogeneous and all the same ways telling it. And then your agent's sort of heterogeneous, which is more likely. Now imagine that as linear, it's very theoretical. Like in an open source, very high level. We have to go from like myself mapping it down to the last person or Samantha to tell it. And then Samantha, it's always good feedback. It can also be useful, and then that feedback is not because at least then you contribution to software. The feedback sometimes it's just to build a piece of different back, different. So now you have this, I don't sort of feedback that is this is interesting. It's giving me different answers. That first goal wasn't like I want to meet this one state, and it would be like if I told that's Jesse this story. That's the way he gave me feedback on what his. You can take one path or another, but what his version was. Then we could get we can coordinate this quite well. I think mapping into your problem. So in terms of the observer. Intermediaries, and then mapping. I get observers back, and I get feedback. I got to get back. I got to get into that paper a little bit. And I have to figure out how to Jesse has this note, and you think about that, so that maybe I just use that simple message. And again, I know but if you have a doc mentioned a lot of things at yesterday's meeting, and it was very enlightening. I think to think about all the ways in which integrating all these track changes open source that I don't necessarily know where they came to. It's going to be harder to do. And this is it gives them more license. So fitting the observer into that, you have an observer who observes the system. We have any other observers who maybe pass on this representation of the system, and they modify it, and then I get this representation back, and it's harder for me to use because I can't understand. Okay, Jesse's smiling. I know what he's thinking. Maybe it's harder for me to understand what its representation is. It's not what we might call shared representation. No, it's different. Now you could build a shared representation by having first order feedback across all these different agents, all these different people, kind of getting this common resource, drawing from it, and then immediately sending feedback.
Right now, everybody's
that's my thinking of it, and I think I'm on the right track, but.
I think so too. I think all Adobe is doing is kind of replacing the observer with this kind of more complex model.
I think the
kind of saying, who are these
better way to
observers, concretely, and saying,
or at least
what are their models for the world?
Something I'll play a look back at. If you look back outside of that,
based on their
3 weeks or 4 weeks,
that's how
I really. That was determined.
Yeah, it's this heterogeneity issue.
I really wanted to fund
so, your agents, they can be homogeneous. They can all have the same goals and the same. But then your agents can also be heterogeneous, which is more likely because everyone has different goals. Like in an open source community, people are going to have different goals. Or in a social setting, people are going to have slightly different goals. But it's always good. It can also be useful to assume that they have the same goals. Because at least then you see what they have in common. Like, why are you all in the meeting? You all have different backgrounds. You may have different goals here, but you all have sort of a common goal. This is interesting, and but that goal doesn't completely describe your state. So. That's the way you can think about that. Is you can take one path or another, but you're going to be
how centralized we want
Yeah,
it.
I mean, it'll work.
Like, is it going to be? I would
Yeah,
develop anyway.
so, you know, in terms of the observer, I think
I don't know.
the observer is important. I got to get back. I got to get into that.
Oh,
paper
I
a
was just
little
going to
bit
answer the
more,
question.
Yeah,
real
so
quick,
keep
which is to
working
say
on
that
this.
I
So
do
Jesse has this
Iowa
notes he put in the chat here Fridays.
Yeah,
You know,
that
we
was
can talk about it in this meeting as
now
well.
that I'm
I actually
tackling
took a bit of a transcript.
And then I did get Brian
kind of
his
imagining that
conversation
this is
with
a
Nick Ashby, so we'll
centralized
follow
kind
up
of,
on that. I think it was pretty good. You know, it was a
so
pretty
there's a way to
good
do like a first
some
order
mentioning
my
this.
notes
what
will
is
Oh, you were going to share your screen,
visual
Jesse?
agent capable of
discussion.
doing
I
and
was
what
just,
are they doing and
Okay.
capabilities,
I
etc.
really like
Very
the restart.
specific
I
computational
thought about it
agent.
before now. It's
Then
really
we
talking
do
about
centralized order, a second order on top of that.
it's almost like the different orders.
And
So yeah, we'll
then
follow up on the Mick
having
Ashby stuff. And
centralized,
Brian shared a newer paper by
what
Mick
is the
Ashby,
model for this
and I
organization?
think one of the channels
What are their
on
shared purposes?
some of the
What are
stuff
their shared
that
goals? So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
and some of the newer thoughts that he's had about this. What did he mention that he's moved on from? Or maybe you mentioned that in Friday's meeting, or Thursday's meeting.
Yeah,
Thanks for that.
a little
Hello,
bit about
Morgan.
it.
How are you?
So, I mean, I found this paper just super fascinating
And
as
where
somebody
there's
who
sort of
loves
a
Heinz von
Yeah, so-
Forster. I mean, basically,
Oh, it's fine. Yeah.
for those of you who
So,
don't know von
I guess,
Forster's work, he's kind of the
Actually, Jesse and I want to talk about the
idea of second order
VR
cybernetics,
stuff.
of the idea of
And I guess you want to know what you might
observe,
cover
and then the
in a
observer,
VR
the
talk.
observer observing, etc.
Oh yeah,
so
if you want to read that now, that's
so
great. I didn't know,
Ashby
like,
kind of takes von
Well,
Forster
I can go over that really
or
quickly, and
Forster
then we can move
past
on to the.
by
I
kind
wanted
of
to talk
saying,
about a discussion for
well,
this
it's all
week.
well and good to talk
Um,
about
yeah, that's
observers,
totally fine.
but what we need
Yeah.
now that our
Something
understanding
I'll
of
play around with.
systems are
Well, I
more
mean, my
complex than
thoughts,
they
and you
were
might
when
ask
Forster
Morgan
was
about
kind of
this as well
formulating these
offline,
things.
or
We need a
uh,
model-centric
like how do you put together a talk on
perspective.
VR? Because it's like this is an
Yeah,
area that's pretty
Because the
hyped. And,
observer now is
Just
kind
to
of
situate
this
it,
is my
like,
interpretation of
I
Ashby's
would
work,
love
that the
to
observer
have
is
him say,
assumed.
like right now, just like
That it's
this
like a portion of the
situation.
observer. You know,
Chat,
we're
say,
all
yeah, well,
humans
there's
talking to
immediate
each other.
evidence
We're all
this way.
they're
There's
humans
the
constructing these
audience, I
systems.
guess,
The
you know,
observer
what's inside-
should be
what's
pretty much
inside people
assumed.
who are in
Basically, again, that's my interpretation. He doesn't say that.
The varying, some folks
But
like the
he goes on to
directories,
say that what we need is a
like
more of a
community
model-centric
feedback,
interpretation.
almost
So
like
that's
what is
why
that contingent on
Himanshu,
people
I
have
think
a lot,
your idea of
going back to
mappings,
like
multi-agent
doing some,
reinforcement
what
learning
what are the
might be
goals
a
available,
really
actually like
productive
in the
approach
field
to this
and
problem.
And there's, and I think there's been a little bit of previewing
discussing
some
Ashby a
of
little bit.
what,
He
like,
kind of ends up with
I think
takes
Mind
this ethical
VR, I think it'll be
regulator paper
great
that
to
we've
see
been
you.
talking about
I
for
don't
a
know
while,
if it's a very
and
simple.
says,
If
okay,
they run
so
for
imagine a
it,
regulator.
Charlie,
He
what
kind
you
of
could,
simplifies
like, you could
the
have
model
some heads
to
it on
have a
and
purpose
count
at
the
the
how
top,
centralized
and
you want
then
it to be.
one
Like, is
chain
it going
going
to I would
out
develop kind of like
is
slowly
the
centralized, very centralized.
intelligence aspect
Very
of things,
not.
or the
So,
maybe
like,
the decision-making process.
so it's
but
not
then
like the most
oh, I was
exciting
just going to answer
role,
the
but
question
it's
really
just
quick, the signal out of the regulator. And then on the other side,
I know that they, I know
purpose informs the
at
intelligence
least
that
some of
describing
my
what
audience,
to do.
which is a very
And then on the other
small
side, purpose
but I know
is
some of the
informed
audience
by
is
an
yeah.
observer kind of
And so
imagining
what
it
I'm
and
looking
informed
at
by
is basically
centralized kind of. No, I'm sorry. Well,
other things
there's a way
that
that
mind
a first
that
order,
may be
very
appealing
specific.
to such a
What is
group
each
of people
individual
who are
individual agent
vested
capable
with
of doing, and what are
trying
they doing, and
to
what are
take
they
care of
doing,
people
etc.
like that,
And
or
then
have money to
computational model
fund
informed by a model, which is informed by observation order. That's on
complement
top of So if you look at the paper, he has really nice diagrams.
and then the hidden or
the regulator
the indirect agenda
in an
is
organization. First order regulator model could be conceived of as just
like the
one
Wii robot
person
stuff and
doing
other
things,
times
going
where
about.
in
So
this
that's
lab,
kind of where I'm at right now.
I'm not
Giving
gonna really say
with their own
hey,
models,
I'm in the lab
the
and I
first
want
order
to do,
regulator.
like,
And then on top of that,
about robots.
you have the
Yeah,
second
great.
order
I want to
regulator.
talk about
Second
I'm not-
order
Thanks for
regulator
that.
is
Hello,
a
Morgan.
different
How are you?
but it's
model,
more like
that
you know,
that includes
is there a way
first
to
order regulator
Yeah,
that
so-
is
if there's a loop
regulated.
sorry made to other great.
Oh, it's fine.
And then on
Yeah.
top of
I
that,
have
you
to
have
kind of
another
So,
regulator.
I guess,
and so each of these
people
regulators
actually,
are-
Jesse
can be
and I want to
mapped
talk
to
about the
second and third order
VR
cycle
stuff,
systems. And each
and I guess
of
you
their
want to know what you
models
might cover
and sets of
in a
purposes
VR talk.
that they have assigned to them.
Oh
and
yeah,
the
if
ways
you
in
wanted
which
to do
their
that now,
intelligence
that's
works
great. I
and
didn't know.
control
That's kind of
is different
Well,
depending
I can go over
I'm
that
not
really
saying it's
quickly, and then
what
we
you're
can
saying
move
here
on
to
to
that, but it's
I
like
want
that's
to talk
what I'm
about a discussion
Yeah,
for this
yeah,
week.
like in that way,
Um,
it regulates
that's totally
itself.
fine. It can be
So there,
It's
I think
all
there are
kind
two
of- that's
ways
why I
to
was
look at
saying earlier,
VR. One is
kind of
like, well, I
going
mean,
back
my
to the
thoughts, So you might ask, state of the art type of qualifying.
So that's
latest
kind of
technology.
an
Like, how do you put
And that could
together
be helpful
talk
if you're
really wanting to get
it's
down to
like-
like
Yeah.
area that's pretty hyped. What do we have in the landscape? And,
That's the best way I could.
So-
but it
summarize
doesn't tell you,
There's
maybe
more
how to
to
use
say.
it. But it doesn't tell you.
The situation.
It doesn't link it back to the problem.
The immediate.
Well, I guess I find that
my
advice
advice
would
would
be
be
to
to
think
think
about
about
idea. And
people
that's the way
the
I always
actual
thought of
problem,
different orders,
health
different health
care,
care
particularly
problems. And
you
first order would be just a simple feedback
worked
with
with
assistive robots
element, so it's like element.
and think about those problems.
A second order would be going
Don't
back
worry about the
like
technology.
a farther
referent.
back.
What is it
Actually,
that what are the kinds of things that you
and
different address
there's
with
been a
that?
little bit of
So
previewing
reasons
from
not the thing that so like for example you might have an assistive setting where
order
you're
and so forth,
use
It almost
VR
is
to
like,
facilitate
reference.
interactions
Or
or
reference
distance.
in
Like you could use
like
why are you using
VR?
VR?
You could use
Some other approach better.
You're
going back,
Something like that. So I
it's
I always
very
think
not-
like.
And it's
Not
not
in
just
terms of the
the
technology
technology
first. So it would be like if I had what are we trying to address
System
the
that I know
technology
that-
you had,
I know-
and then people were reviewing. Say this is the technology. We're
We're
reviewing a
very
document,
small,
and you
and
had
it's
this how sequentially.
But I know
So
some of the
you had one
ones
person
that-
review it then,
Because,
otherwise you
what I'm
get
looking
trapped.
at
And
is-
I think you've heard of this
old
where you
model
say, oh,
of,
this is a
like,
great
if you
technology
pass
message
this
around,
mind
and then you just
that
kind of
will
start
modify
talking about the technology, and
if
then
you're
forget about the
people
problem. So
that
that when
you
it comes
can-
back, and that's where you
around
start
it
getting a
sounds
lot
take
of
care of
like
people
undue
like
hype.
that,
The
or
original where you say,
much
well,
that
this is
people ask
great,
more than-
technology and has all these
so
features. I'm
that-
sitting here, I pass
And
it
then,
to
it's
Jesse,
like, well, it
pass
doesn't
it
really
to
solve the
Amanda,
problem.
pass it
And
to
then the
Brian,
hidden
and so
disorder,
forth. By the time it gets back to me,
and
you want to avoid that because it's like retelling it, and I hear a different story. It's kind of like AI, where we can play. Now imagine that in a linear fashion.
I'm not gonna really say.
But it's
hey,
not
we
we
have
have
to go from lab
myself to in the one person Samantha
about, like,
to tell it what it is. Samantha sends a feedback
so,
back
I mean,
to
you
me.
know,
And then that
like,
feedback is
research
not different
there
exact
a way
application
to
matching
do-
therapy. There are a
if
lot of
there's a
feed forward
application
that I
that's
sent
something,
in
right?
healthcare.
Because
It's quite different
literature.
So now you have you can find distorted resources feedback areas that is
AR,
from,
VR,
it's going to give you a different answer to assist in the first technologies to be immediate. And it would be like if I told Jesse this sensory substitute, he gave me feedback on what what he heard, or what his version of it is, then we could get, we could coordinate interpret well, and it wouldn't be a problem. But if I send it through a number of centimeters, I think there are two ways to get message back. One is like, what happened here? State of the art. I have to like figure out how to put that together. And you think about that, like, and that can be helpful. Maybe I just use that simple message. What do we have like a document maybe change it through sound. But it doesn't tell you, maybe how to use it. But it doesn't tell you. So there are different types of integrating all these track changes. I would think that I don't necessarily. My advice would be to think about like. And the actual problem you have, it gives you more license if you're trying to improve people. So I mean, fitting the observer into that. You have an observer work with assistive robots, observe the world, and you have other observers. Think about those problems for some representation. Don't worry about the technology. Maybe model we're afraid of going. What is it representation? What are the kinds of harder for me to use? That address help them. I can't understand. Okay, just so like for example, you might have a assistive setting. It's harder for me to some other problem with its representation. Use VR. It's not we might call shared, but because the technology changes so much. Now you why are you using build a shared representation? You use some other. So I have a first order feedback. So I mean, I would think all these different agents. I mean, if you're demoing a technology first, kind of the problem getting more common. But if you're like, what are you trying from like in this immediate, this is the way to go. And then say this is the. I mean, that's my thinking problem first, and this is maybe maybe how it's. I think we can find because otherwise you get trapped in this, where you say, "Oh, this is a great technology, this is cool," and then you just kind of start talking about the technology and then forget about the problem domain, and that's where you start getting a lot of like undue hype, where you say, "Well, this is great, technology and has all these features and great." And then it's like, it's doesn't really see any problem. But it's, so it's cool. Your agents, basically, they can be homogeneous. They can all have the same goals and stuff. But then your agents supposed to be heterogeneous, which is more likely than anything. Everyone has different goals. And it can
sort of
like in an
along
open
lines
source
what
community,
Bradley's
but it's
saying,
not
I was just
necessarily
gonna say,
that good. In the long term, we're gonna have slightly different goals. But what it actually does, it's always good. So it can also be useful to assume. I've done some research on because at least then you can see what they have in therapy. There are a lot of why are you all in the meeting in healthcare? You all have different backgrounds. You may have different goals here. I mean, you can find that you all have sort of a different areas of therapy. This is interesting, and physical therapy to that whole analogy completely describes the different types of that's the way you can think about that. As we've talked about that. You can take one path or another, but you're going to be a way that helps people to interpret. Maybe like. Yeah, if you're deaf, in terms of the observer, I think
he's got a good
the observer is I got to get back. I got to get into that paper, haptic medium. So Jesse has this blind. They have canes that have like a sonar attachment, so you can they can kind of get a sense of maybe through sound what the environment is in front of them, things like that. So there are different types of approaches to this. I would think though about the problem first, or what you're trying to do with it. What do you have? If it's like if you're trying to improve people's lives, if you're trying to improve interactions between people and the world, with maybe a therapist or with a person who, with maybe people were afraid of going outside. They don't want to talk to people.
What does that afford?
That might help them facilitate interactions with people.
Maybe
Maybe it's just a matter of some other problem that no one's ever thought of. But because the technology changes so much, it's kind of pointless to point to specific pieces of technology and say this is where we'll start and then we'll go. I mean, if you're demoing demo or die stuff, I know that's something. That's one thing. But can you summarize that? Trying to convince people that this is the way to go. Then I would start with the problem first, and then go to the technologies, and say we can find technology to help go here.
It's suffice to say,
have you caught some of Andreas' talk?
Really need to actually be like.
Where he's talking about cognition.
Let's say I'll play around with that. Particularly I did reach out to MIT is particularly. I really product to be determined focus down the road. They sent me a demo and they was talking about how you've got to people will rotate. I was basically on call because if somebody shows up, hey, I heard about your product.
Sort of along the lines of what Bradley is saying. I was just going to say, when he
tell me about it, and it's like just having the
things that
both being able to understand what's going on in your feedback in your project, individual does understand what the audience make it difficult and how to have an effective demo, basically impromptu effective demo. What are the words that are
it needs to be customized.
Okay, well here's a trajectory path you might be going down, and I think it's kind of fascinating.
But he does have kind of like a set of core technology.
I think it'll be great, like in a less direct. I don't know in the field sense. And basically, people are talking about a whole meeting.
These make a difference.
In terms of how centralized do you want it to be? Being able to, is it going to be, are we developing a way of decentralized or MMI iteration?
He's got a good
sort of here's a frontier.
I was going to answer the question really quick, which is to say that
here's angles, but
kind of like
being able to just kind of show up and
describing,
like boom, put yourself do it. You're there now. You have a couple minutes to
imagining that maybe there's a way to do it
to somebody and have I would
say,
I'm not thinking. I think there's a bit of pressure, performers do it. I'm not
capable of doing, and what are they doing, and
what
are
are
the
the
abilities,
people?
etc. I think very specific computational model for each of
Put
them.
yourself on
Then
this
we decentralize
order. What is it?
on top of that.
And how do you talk about something say tangential or partial interest? I think being couple focused is great and knowing where your audience and understanding what you care about, really putting yourself in the mindset.
What are their shared
and a consistent basis to say, okay,
that's kind of where I'm at right now.
It's better to say less and have something on point and what they care about. And here's why you get funded for, here's why you should pay attention, here's why it matters, all those other things.
Yeah, great.
There's much more to say about
thanks for that. Hello, Morgan. How are you?
Bradley, I'll follow up for sure about that in Slack.
Okay. Yeah. So that's good.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry I'm late.
That's fine. So
next thing I wanted to
demo
talk
or
about,
die
I guess,
stuff. I know that's something you
actually,
can you
Jesse
summarize
made
that?
brain,
And I wanted to
talk
talk about
about
brain.
brain.
Is that something
VR stuff.
I mean, we've been talking about
So
all
I
there's
guess you
this-
want to know what
I'm
you're
gonna share
showing
my
my
screen.
I was looking. I was trying to
There's this
find the right article,
conversation.
oh yeah, if you wanted, there's
Twitter
that's
this week
great. I didn't know.
about,
Like,
and I think I mentioned it.
Well,
I can go over that really quickly, and
I
then
think it was a
Wednesday
Wednesday
meeting.
meeting.
I wanted to
I think
talk
it's a
about.
really
So there was this
special
idea
like,
that
yeah, that's totally fine.
Blake Richards
like,
does a
let's
lot
say
of
you're in a lab. Let's say
machine
you're-
learning and deep
Well, I
learning.
mean, my
Like,
thoughts, and you might ask Morgan about this as well.
So,
offline, or,
basically,
there's an aspect
like,
how do you
scale
together
data
talk
and
about
VR
VR because it's like
this
that is surprisingly
let's talk
pretty
about how,
hyped
like,
in what I see.
Yeah, like,
Yeah, I think his
we gotta,
background
like,
is in.
people
He,
will
does, I think he has
be-
some cognitive
be
science
basically
background.
on
But he
call,
works in
because if somebody shows up,
AI,
and
things
says, hey,
like that.
I heard
So,
about your product.
The insight that he's pointing to here is that large language models, which are like the
Tell me about it. And it's
we've
like,
talked
just
about the
having-
different language
having-
models like GPT-3 and some of these other ones.
Prove
Prove Chomsky's poverty of the stimulus argument to be false. So this is a argument in linguistics and cognitive science. And then what was interesting about this thread was that people were not like on the same page as to what the poverty of the stimulus was. So I'm going to point to some like subtweets and some papers that came out of this conversation because I think it's really informative in terms of like how this sort of like what we're finding with AI and artificial neural networks. A lot of this research is doing in the context of cognitive science and how it's affecting the development of cognitive science. So his point was here is this is pretty big, and I'm surprised it's not discussed. And then this kind of comes back later and says, what's interesting to me in the reactions to this thread is that people clearly interpret the poverty of the stimulus argument differently from how my linguistics professor taught me. So this is just kind of like interesting how people kind of maybe they have different ways of defining it, maybe they have different ways of thinking about it. Is that like something out of the textbook? You know, you have something out of the textbook or out of the linguistics class that gets taught versus what people are actually thinking when they are confronted with this issue in real life. So this is an interesting way that we can look at sort of how these things interact. And then it says later, I suspect my profs accurately described the original argument. So either the claims chain is good too, thank you, or people are probably taking.
Next thing I wanted to talk about was
So yeah, that's I mean, you know, people do that on the internet, but it's also it goes back to this issue of so there's this something in a share my screen and people take away there's this conversation from it that are relevant to their interests on Twitter this week slightly different. And I think I mentioned it in one. We'll see what.
I'm not saying it's telling
I think it was a Wednesday meeting with some other. So there was this idea
So
that again. This is the original tweet.
Blake Richards,
I think there's two ways to look at VR. Machine learning is widely recognized from my just random state-of-the-art discussion. Or cognitive basically, there's an aspect of large scale that can be helpful if you're really wanting to get down to that is surprisingly, you know, what do we have? I think his background is in but it doesn't tell you, maybe how to use it. But it doesn't tell you. Said I'm so excited. It doesn't link it back to the insight that he's pointing to is large language advice paper. Think about like the actress covers a paper language model for GPT-3 and some of these other NeuroSim. So someone actually proved Chomsky's poverty assisted robots paper up in a minute. So this is think about those other tweets, linguistics. Don't worry about the thread. I'm just like picking out things. What is it? And then you know what was interesting about the POS argument was that people are not like reasonable on the same. So like, you know, for example, you might have an assistive. So I'm going to point to some. What does that have to do with like use VR to facilitate conversation? I think it's really 45 terabytes. Why are you using VR? How you could use some sort of like poverty with AI like that. So I mean, I would think like research, but not in terms of kind of like hitting on this problem definition. It's affecting like what are we trying to address with the technology? So his point was here. And then basically the idea is that technology not enough data. And then
this
is
works.
this
So
might
kind of
comes
goes
back
back
later and says, because otherwise you get trapped as a stimulus that people clearly where you say, oh, this is a great technology, this is cool, different. And then you just how I'm so about the technology is that you forget about the LLMs or major. So this is just kind of like getting a lot of how people undo hype. Kind of where you say maybe they have different relationship with technology and data features and great things, and then it's just that doesn't really something out of the textbook. You have something out of the textbook. I mean, this is basically linguistics, and you want to avoid that because it's taught. I think what people you're getting the kind of like AI wrong here, where you can play. The claim wasn't about the amount of data. The claim was the generative, but it's not necessarily that good. Sort of in the long term, and these things in data can never suffice. What it actually does. So this is again. So I mean, another thing about I suspect done some language research, and this is something that applications. So either the claims there are a lot of applications where people care. It isn't so much about the amount of. So that's resources and different people do that on the internet structure, but it's also physical therapy. It goes back to the structural technology. Learn something in a class. Different types of language is about structure from sensory substitution, and it's about slightly different words put into sentences. We'll see that really makes a language. Otherwise, you're just generating words. And then interpret. So this is something that you can learn from sound waves, responding to some different media, but it's also widely recognized in life that there's a haptic medium or cognitive science. So learning that like directly versus inferring. So here is one example. A lot of attachments, you can visuals. They can get a sense of. So maybe very sound. This is take the environment in front of them. GPT-3 I know there are different types of approaches to this. At least I would think learning about program induction language. I have a paper in Atlas. This person said there was a paper a while back which made a similar point. So someone actually looked at this problem, interaction, special paper world. So you can learn language by dumping a bunch of words. This kind of goes through the thread. I'm kind of afraid of going out associations and things like that. The POS argument that together to help them. But if you're actually learning languages and mapping, learn all the maybe it's just meaning of the word. Then some other problem. What does that have to do with LLMs? You can't really figure out the language. So, but because the technology 25 terabytes of data, it's kind of not. It's kind of the inability to develop semantics. Poverty is stimulus. This is. Not going to go through the definition, but I mean, if you're demoing, kind of like hitting on it, you can look at the definition. But if you're there's some other behaviors, like convince people that this is the way to go. Sort of investigate. Basically, the idea is there's not enough data. This paper is a culmination of 3+ years exposed investigating, so we can find a tactic capabilities of today's auto as a stimulus. Then you don't learn with carefully controlled experiments like we do the linguistics experiment. So this idea is that this paper LLMs will go to some of the papers and then here's another take. I disagree with the relation with more training than they're happy to learn training set size. Humans learn with less data and have inductive biases that limit what is learned. I mean, this is like we discussed here. So this is a priorless recurrent network. I think you're getting priorless POS argument wrong here for my memory. So the claim wasn't about the amount of data. The claim was the generative another set of takes here. This is paper to finite. You cannot learn what's not there. Self-supervised. So this is again another thing about it. So people have explored languages, and this is something that came up. You can see Gary Marcus. There's some empirical work on this. I published a paper. It isn't so much about the amount of have difficulty learning so that you can learn. It's really about the structure of language. Alternation is the structure of drizzle, spray water, correct versus drizzle. That language is about structure. It's about grammar. The evidence for this is not about the speech or the way words are put in. This is kind of that really makes a language. Otherwise, you're just generating words, just dumping data on the model. So this is something that you can learn from architectures, the massive amounts of data. But it's also, this one is Life, the Santiago Renteria, who I think Jesse put a link to. So, learning that like directly versus inferring it. And this is a little bit more, a lot of words, sort of contentious. Language is not simply a symbolic system. The concept Gary Marcus, his take is that no, it makes me vomit. GPT-3 can't. So I wouldn't vomit a stimulus argument. At least not if you're learning. If you see again, these are the perspectives of the computing syntax. So some of these papers you have. This is actually linked to neurophenomenology originally. So the paper, the Hitchhiker's Guide to Neurophenomenology. So you can learn language by dumping a bunch of words on the AI. Meditators learn association. This is a nice guide to this area. Put words together. But if you're actually learning language as a mapping between syntax and semantics, or the meaning of maybe this isn't the one I want, then but this is pop language. So for example, GPT-3 infers this is semantics, and so the inability to develop they kind of go over support stimulus, and they kind of think about this. That's one take. So the other demo or dice. This isn't really getting into takes here. Can you summarize that? Some other papers. This is kind of reevaluating. People have sort of investigated. This link really talk about some of this paper is a combination of 3 plus such expanding selection of syntactic capabilities of today's auto selectable grammars respect carefully controlled experiments like we would use in several researchers have tried to rebut these subjects. TLS paper here in response to some arguments. And then there's another take. I disagree. Networks are much more structured and they're happy to learn a grammar language. Humans learn with less data, but have inductive bias. This is kind of going over the properties of stimulus, very much in that framework perspective. Paper priorless recurrent. This paper is priorless recurrent networks. I have that mixed papers that I went into. So this talks another set of takes. Domain general recurrent. This is a paper without explicit learning what's not there. So ISE's learning have been shown to successfully reproduce. So people have explored language self-supervised learning, such as accurately predicting number agreement. There's some empirical work on this I published to show that such networks shows ANNs and difficulties learning some verbal or sentence structures that don't have any basis in natural alternations, or which, for example, drizzle, spray water, number of reason plant versus maybe it has spray the plant. Vagaries in it. The evidence for this is not available in context. So, this find that while the model has an effective understanding of singular versus just dumping data on sentences, and there's a lack of unified concepts of architecture connecting these processes across the full. And then, of course, this one is Santiago Renteria, kind of Jesse Kennedy's Facebook post to his being able to Slack. And this is a little bit more using computational contentious syntax. Language is not simply a symbolic system. This one talks about language. So we study the learnability makes me vomit. So I wouldn't vomit. I am constraints. You can go down a rabbit. This is again. These are things. There's a lot of the perspective jargon and that. So some of these papers you have. This is actually linked to neurolinguistic approaches and study this. There's a paper, The Hitchhiker's Guide to Neurophenomenology. Models acquired not only the basic intelligence, medias, fillers, and gaps, but also the unboundedness and hierarchical. This is a nice guide to this area. So they're learning things about language that aren't just the words. There's other papers. Some of these, different. Maybe this is like. But this paper is a model for learning strings is not. There's much more to say about this. Is a paper. This one talks about people sort of, and they kind of go language acquisition is possible. That's good to think about knowledge of structure. Next thing I want to talk about is this isn't really getting into the higher pieces. Your brain had this is kind of reevaluating, kind of pre-large. This is in response. So there's this where they talk about some of this stuff. There's this conversation. Such experience to selection of grammars of humans. I think I mentioned it. Selectable grammar. Some of the things from that article. I think it was a Wednesday. They kind of get their own. So there's this idea that when rebut these, but I just pulled it up. POS arguments. Flake response wheel has a lot of POS merging learning and typically not assumed support for computation process. So simply basically there's an aspect of large scale AI is like this is surprising over the underhype. So they talk about that. This is background is to do with that. I think he has some cognitive science background. This paper is having a training AI training seriously. That's one of the papers. The insight benefit pointing to this large language domain general recurrent neural networks without it. Talked about the different language models like IST3 have been shown to successfully reproduce a major goal of Chomsky's poverty of science is understand the class of learning system. So this is a show that such networks will recently the computational cognitive science have been used to argue that learning that don't. What was interesting about this thread was that people were which humans here we describe on the same page as the reason property. Maybe it has vague reasons. So I'm going to point to some give it where many of the like subtweets. So papers we find that while the model has an effective understanding of singular formative versus plural for individual sentences, there's a lack of dividing with AI and artificial connecting for a lot of this research things we're doing in the context of kind of how you'll kind of looking at these networks. So his point was here is this is pretty big, and I'm surprised it's not using computational models. And then this ability kind of comes back. This one talks about some. What's interesting to study the reactivity of English filler is that people clearly tendencies regular stimulus are. You could go down a rabbit hole from how my linguistics was for many a lot of jargon and so this is just kind of like look at things how small amounts of positive kind of maybe they have different approaches to defining and study this generative speculative structures, meaning is that models sometimes are different basic, you have something out of the pillars and out of the things, but also the unboundedness and that gives you this idea people are actually thinking. So they're learning things about art in front of words and issue, and they're able to get out some of these an interesting language structure way that is that possible sort of how you need. This paper is a model for learning strings as and then and how you would do it. Says later this one I suspect my props accurately describe the original semantic language. Either the claims change send some information people are probably taking from the authors claim that a domain that's where people do that on the internet language. But it's also did you have any comments on that? This is in response to learn something in a class and people take away things. So this is in response to an article. Slightly different talk about and some we'll see what some of the things from that article and they kind of give some perspective. So like a one again, but I just pulled it up. This is the original tweet. Responding to someone here. Merge is not typically widely recognized or by just randomly miss such discussions. Simply for cognitive scientists and linguists keeping natural language syntax additionally needs. So here is one example here. This person, so they talk about Steve. This is again, Piety with this idea, Pianosi. Having said, I'm so excited for this paper that they one model for the learning program induction library paper. I have the papers in this list. And this person said there was a paper a while back which this talks about playing without the use of ANNs. So someone actually, a major goal of linguistics and cognitive science is to understand what a massive learning system can acquire naturally. Another tweet until recently kind of goes through the thread. I'm just kind of like picking out things that have been used to argue that learning is impossible. The POS argument claims that children are not exposed to zero-based learning systems learn all axioms of language. From these data over the space of innate factations, what does that have to do with LLMs, natural language models trained on? So this is just from what they call 45 terabytes of data in the case of GPT-3. So the poverty stimulus argument, the data goes through the definition of formal languages. We're kind of like hitting on it. You can look up the definition in general, put on Wikipedia or whatever. Comes from an interesting. Basically, the idea is that there's not able to sort of learn a lot of different language. So you're exposed to language. If you're not exposed to very much strings and rules, so it's a general stimulus that generates regular context-free be a participant in the languages. So as well as this idea is that LLMs or large language models there's also that relatively small amounts of positive evidence. And what's the relationship between the data, generative training set size, meaning that diversities, different types of rules as companies. So, this is like something to think about. That gives you this idea. You're getting the POS argument model here. That put words in. The claim wasn't about the amount of data. The claim was the generative structure can construct infinite many possible sentences you need and no modified data symbolic system for. So this is, again, another thing about language is that language isn't, and this is something Samantha said she had to go. See, Gary Marcus said she'll send some information about it isn't so much about the amount of words that you could learn. It's really about the structure of language. Did you have any comments on that? I know that was a lot. Structure was, of course, being correct. that language is about structure, it's about
Sure would.
grammars,
I mean,
and it's about sort of the way words
these
are put
large
into
language
sentences.
models
That really makes a language. Otherwise, you're just generating words,
other
and they don't make very
kind
much
of
sense.
areas.
So this is something that you can learn from being exposed to massive
want
amounts of data,
to
but it's also a fact of life that there is a
Even if
structure
you're not
that has to be.
directly interested in kind of the
So, learning that like
linguistic
directly versus
discussion
inferring it
also
from
kind of reminded me
a lot of
of,
words and a lot of
so
sentences.
the one thing I
is-
dropped
is
in earlier was
so
just,
Gary Marcus says his take is
where
that no,
the
GPT-3
beginning of it,
can't
she's
disprove
talking
the
about
poverty of the
debate over
stimulus
the dress.
argument.
The
At least
person
not if
had
you're
X
learning
look
language.
like,
If you see learning
and,
language as being about
like how
learning
it
and
brought
mapping
out, this
between
really had some
syntax
other
and
great,
semantics. So
between
Gary Marcus has a background in
SEO
linguists
and SEO,
originally, so
and then
that's his
like
specialty.
the dress.
I don't know.
So you can learn language by dumping a bunch of words on the AI, and it can learn
a lot of basic
associations and
But
things
he also
like that, and put
has-
words
I mean, I
together.
really enjoyed
But if
his
you're actually
post
learning language as a mapping
goes
between
over
syntax and semantics,
that
or the meaning of the words,
she has
then
how they're
you
changing.
you
She
know
talks about in this
you can't
interview
really
having,
fully learn the language. So, for example, GPT-3 infers no semantics, only syntax, and so the inability to develop a semantics is support for POS. That's one take. The other take is, there are other takes here. There's some other papers where people have sort of investigated this link. Here's one. This paper is a culmination of 3+ years' work by investigating the syntactic capabilities of today's large language models with carefully controlled experiments like we would use in a psycholinguistics experiment with human subjects. So this paper here, I'll go to some of the papers. And then here's another take. I disagree. Networks need much more training, and they are happy to learn any language. Humans learn with less data, but have inductive biases that limit what is learnable. This is what we discussed here. So this is a priorless recurrent network. Okay, yeah, I mean, I think that the paper large language models are just one example. Curious. We could get into this about like how that was collection. And then another set of takes here. This is a paper. You cannot learn what's not there. Self-supervised learning. I know in NeuroMatch there have been a couple of. So people have explored this with self-supervised learning. People have looked at congruency, but there's actually a metric on this last year. A couple papers. Congruency between have difficulty learning C and neuroimagery results for different things. Alternation language. For example, drizzle spray water on the plant versus drizzle patterns in vision. The evidence for this is not like what a neural network. So this is kind of ways that you can test. This is a distinction between brain networks. Just dumping data on where you get and learning fMRI data. You look at how it's activated. Architectures are activated for language with respect to stimulus. And this one is like Santiago Renteria. I think Jesse put a link. There's a Facebook post to his and a couple of different metrics. And this is a little bit more sort of contentious layers. Language is not simply a symbolic system. The concept of language in AI is so important. I'll pass on. It makes me vomit. So I have different layers of the neural network and the different areas. This is again. These are the sort of that's an area that people are looking at. So some of these papers more in general. This is actually language phenomenology and things like that. So as a paper where these models tied to neurophenomenology, is it maybe thesis studies languages because it seems like language does. Or metadata language can generate things. So this is a nice guide to this area. If you really push it, is it really generating this? Sometimes it makes some pretty big errors. Okay, and so it isn't so much the rate. It's like this is okay. So this is poverty. Yeah, generating secret language. So that was actually something another interesting was this idea, and they kind of go over poverty of the stimulus and generating think of secret languages. And this reminds me of 2011. So this isn't really getting into the large language, which is a language. This is kind of reevaluating, like kind of Sims that speak this language. Yeah. Now that language is some of this stuff. Such experience warrants selection that grammar is acquired only if humans. Glosses that selectable grammars respect sensitive constraints.
Two things about
So several researchers have tried to rebut these POS arguments. In response, we illustrate why POS arguments remain an important source of support for appeal to a priori structure-dependent constraint on the grammars for humans. So this is like. This is kind of going over the poverty of the stimulus very much in that framework. Okay, yeah, I mean, I think that in large language models, this paper is priorless. We're getting into this about curious how it's one of the papers pointed to. So this talks about domain general recurrent neural networks, different things like without explicit linguistic and other biases. And then shown to success in a couple of ranging human projects behaviors. People have looked accurately for congruency. Actually, I mentored a couple last year. Show that such congruency between like unnatural sentences what we see in or central images that don't have any basis in natural. There was one on language, or which humans, and there was another one on visual number of reasons. Maybe it has vagaries in vision, really, and given like what a context neural network. So we find that there are ways of effective understandings between like the brain net versus plural for individual sentences. There is a lack of data and concept how it's activated. Different areas are connecting these processes with respect to stimulus, and then you look at what artificial neural network, kind of looking at these. There's like with respect to a couple of different metrics. In this paper, using computational models to test syntactic learnability of neural network. This one talks about some of these. We study the learnability of English filler. The different layers of the neural constraints. You could go down a rabbit hole. There's a lot of psycholinguistics because there's a lot of that's an area jargon and that. But you can look at. I think it's more in general, like we talk about psycholinguistic approaches, things like that, and study this with. So what are these models actually generating? Models acquire not only the basic conditions, because it seems like there's gaps when we get the unboundedness and generate things within constraints, but then in the dependence, if you really start learning things about language and aren't just really generating, they're able to. Sometimes some of these different. So it isn't so much their rate; it's like magnitude. This paper is a model for generating things as language with language. So that was actually this one. Another interest talks about this idea, sort of how language acquisition is possible. Generating to language structures. It reminds me of some authors claim that a domain general ruler in the SIM acquire key pieces of language that if you ever played the Sims, this is in response to Yang. Now that language is designed. Piantadosi. So this is a response to an article, but and so Colossus the Forbin subject. Some of the things in that article, and they kind of get their own perspective on this. It's like a one-page thing, but I just pulled it up because it was in the thread. Merge is not typically not assumed to be a concatenation process. It simply forms sets and does not impose order. Natural language syntax additionally needs a set categorization or labeling operation. And so they talk about that. And this is again, to do with this idea of, putting, having a training set, what that training set needs to look like. One model for the learning of language, this is the original paper from the previous one, Yang and Piantadosi. And so this talks about, a major goal of linguistics and cognitive science is to understand what class of learning systems can require natural language. Until recently, the computational requirements of language have been used to argue that learning is impossible without a highly constrained hypothesis space. Here we describe a learning system as maximally unconstrained, operating over the space of all computations that can acquire many of the key structures of natural language. So this is just from what they call positive evidence.
Just like the Forbin project, right?
We demonstrate that providing the same learning model, and then data from 74 just constructed language, really the words which have been argued, so it's actually translators of language. But then is there a grammar? Is there comes from an interesting complexity? Because I think a lot of these design languages sort of learn a lot of different lexicon. Translate one word to another. Sorts of strings. I think so it's something like Klingon, which was also a constructed language. They develop context-free, sort of a higher order set of rules for it, but as well as for it's still constructed language. So it's interesting to think of those things in relatively small amounts of positive evidence. And support learning of rich classes. And of course, our large language models aren't really built, meaning that explicitly for that purpose, different types of rules, these combinations together. So we don't have things in them. So that gives you this idea of how, models that you put words into it and you get out, a structured language. Is that possible, or is that something that you need, like a symbolic system for, and how do you do it?
you can kind of see some of the thought.
But it was funny because I
So
brought
Samantha
up
said she had to
So
go.
I would just say,
She
like,
said she'll send some information about American Sign Language and VRAR later. So
similar
thank you for
things
attending,
with
Samantha.
regards to language models.
And did you have any comments on that? I know that was a lot of
case
stuff,
of
but
like, well, what if this is like a psychiatric chatbot kind of thing? And for sure wouldn't. I mean, so it's like, so what papers, might these large language models that are intended in the context of other multi-agent areas have a human review the script. It has zillion people came up to be following them. You want state of the art, even if you're not directly interested in the core linguistic emergence of this economy between the agents. So the one thing I dropped in earlier was if you allow the Patrick agents no harm history running. It was nice to allow the agents to communicate and to share information about how to do the task, how they brought up a task that they're being trained. Some issue about CTO or CSO. They said, it's like you can try and constrain language. I don't know if it's still right? Where it's like you can have the language evolve. If you leave it open, it's. But he also has. I mean, it's a really particular approach, but he kind of goes over. I've been trying to get some of these language models simulation. How they're
thanks for that conversation. It was very useful. And so next week we'll be back. We'll have some new topics. And if anyone airs an emergent secret language, that was it. And then I say it's English is constructed. It's probably the word present. So it's like you can translate a word.
But again,
but then is there a grammar? Is there like other structure in there? Other meanings? Because I think a lot of these design languages are largely like words. Lexicon. It's translate one word to another. And I think like with something like Klingon, which was also a constructed language, they've developed sort of a higher order set of rules for it, but it's still constructed language. So
deep learning.
It's interesting to think how those things emerge though. I like the idea of like seeing, and of course our large language models aren't really built explicitly for that purpose. They just kind of like
there's a deep
put things
learning
together, so we don't know.
Workshop that's coming up, right? So I said this to Brian. Even more interesting. I just wanted to also say that when I was on camping last weekend, we were with another family, and they're both NLP researchers. Really fascinating. It's just a coincidence. But it was funny because I like the issue of Patrick's saying about how safety, AI safety, how we do science, and similar things with regards to language models.
I think that's really cool. I would say,
like, well, what if this is like a psychiatric chatbot kind of thing?
That folder.
So it's like, so what papers might you suggest in terms of are there computational?
No, that's really cool.
I enforce this.
I have a lot of thoughts about
have
that.
a human review the script.
I want a magical.
You want state of the art.
That's what I want to do.
You have a script. It's vetted by multiple humans. Also, kind of reminded me of the computer sticks to the script. Dissertation that's the legal where no harm. Beginning of it is she's just talking about the debate over the dress. It's nice to shut down that particular and nothing to look for, like how it brought out this really interesting discussion in the field between some issues about all these high-level vision reseachers. But they said that kind of like the dress try and constrain the inputs. It's helped further our understanding. Of a lot of basic concepts. It's like AGI. It's like I've really enjoyed her cases, her dissertation break it. That she has.
Well, thanks for that conversation. That was very useful. And so next week we'll be back and we'll have some new topics. And if anyone airs an emergent secret language, that was a legend representation of movement. If you want to present, please let me know.
Would be interesting to follow up with.
Otherwise, have a good week and see you
this
around
comes
Slack
up with
in our other meetings
and things like that.
All right, take care.
Once you have probes that can scale down, right? What are you looking for? What's the representation you're looking for? And captured. What's it look like?
It's like Amanda wanted to say something. Did you? Okay. But Imanshu, did you have anything? Okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. No. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think that large language models are just one example. Like, we could get into this about like how, artificial neural networks represent, different things like visual stimuli and other things like that. I know in NeuroMatch there have been a couple of projects where people have looked at like the congruency. But actually, I mentored a couple last year. The congruency between like what we see in neuroimaging results for different things. There was one on language, in fact, and there was another one on visual stimuli, like different types of patterns in vision, and then like what a neural network can generate. So there are ways that you can test the difference between like a brain network, which is where you get like fMRI data and you look at how it's activated, different areas are activated with respect to a stimulus, and then you look at what like a artificial neural network can generate. And there's like a couple of different metrics that you can use to look at the correspondence between different layers of a neural network. And yeah, yeah, I'll pass on the link to the drive. The different layers of the neural network, and then the different areas of the brain that are activated. So that's an area people are looking at. But I think it's more in general, like we talk about interpretability of models and things like that. And it's like, what are these models actually generating? Is it, maybe something like language? Is it, because it seems like language to us. When we get a language model, it can generate things that look like language. But then, if you really push on it and say, is it really generating? Sometimes it makes some pretty big errors. And so it isn't so much the error rate, it's like this magnitude of the error. Yeah, generating secret language. So that was actually something, another interesting point was this idea of how they're generating secret languages. And it reminds me of something called Simlish, which is in The Sims, which is a language that if you ever played The Sims, they speak this language. Yeah. Now that language is designed by, I guess someone created it for the game, but Colossus the Forbin Project, which is another.
Two things about this. One, I'm going to talk about the Forbin Project first, and then more about that language, because that's a funny tie into plot twisters.
Okay.
I think I might have mentioned this before, and probably the older folks, which I'll say I'm an older folk. I'm an old man now. So, but the Forbin Project is this I looked up again when did it come out? It was 1970, but it was the super AGI of the United States. It's about to control a lot of stuff, and like, oh, we should defer our stuff to the super AGI. And of course, there's one in Russia too. Mm-hmm. But then they talk to each other. That they connect because of the fake internet becomes they communicate somehow, and then they make their own secret language, and no one can ever interpret them and take over the world. And it's actually kind of a fun movie, but I keep every time this comes up, I want to drop the Forbin Project just because I feel like nobody probably knows about it. Like all the younger people have no idea what it is. It's like, yeah, just like the Forbin Project, right? And they have no idea what. So it's basically, I'm just making a petty inside joke for my own humor, like most things that I do. Okay, outside of that, and I don't know if people want to comment on, they can. But what was it called? Simese, you said?
Simlish.
Yeah. We had this is such a cool time, because actually it's just tending to the messages from Avery and Jenny now about this, but in the world that they're making, like, we're actually we just referenced Simlish last week, but making it potentially based on some of the cards, because there's like a suit, 4 suits of cards we're using to represent some of the journey work or whatever that's happening. But like using almost like we're depending on how much we get there, but using the sort of a similar like simple like between that or like maybe Animal Crossing. So people know Animal Crossing, but like, there's sort of this like fake language, or like you can kind of see some of the thought bubble process happening, and how does that happen? So I would just say like there's a lot to say there. I know we're out of time. If you have anything interesting about Simlish that you've come across in the context of this conversation, Bradley or Morgan or anyone else, I'd really be interested to see that, because that's relevant to some plot stuff right now. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's also interested in the context of multi-agent reinforcement learning, where the example came up. I think last time of the barter thing. I was DeepMind had emergence of this economy between the agents. But if you allow the agents, sorry, that's a hamster running in a wheel. If you allow the agents to communicate, to share information about how to do the task, or how to do a task that they're being trained, then there's some emergent language, right? Or it's like you can have the language evolve too, and I would be, I'm not really familiar with this literature, but I've been trying to get some of these simulation environments running. It's really, I bet there's some interesting things in terms of language development too.
Yeah. And then, I say it's Simlish is constructed, it's really the words, so it's like you can translate a word, but then, is there a grammar, is there like other structure in there that, because, I think a lot of these design languages are largely like words, lexicon, it's, translate one word to another. And I think like with something like Klingon, which was also a constructed language, they've developed a sort of a higher order set of rules for it, but it's still constructed language. So it's interesting to think how those things emerge, though. I like the idea of like seeing, and of course, our large language models aren't really built explicitly for that purpose. They just kind of like put things together. So we don't know.
I'd said this to Brian. I just wanted to also say that when I was on camping last weekend, we were with another family, and they're both NLP researchers. And just coincidence. But it was funny because I brought up the issue of safety, AI safety, and similar things with regards to language models, and gave them the kind of the use case of like, well, what if this is like a psychiatric chatbot kind of thing, and so I was like, so what papers might you suggest in terms of are there computational techniques to help enforce this? And they were like, have a human review the script. that's you want state of the art. you have a script. It's vetted by multiple humans. And the computer sticks to the script. That's the legal. That no harm. So it was nice to shut down that particular. There's nothing to look for. No good paper. They brought up some issues about prompting, but they said like you can try and constrain the inputs. Right. But it's if you leave it open, it's like AGI. It's like you can always find edge cases that'll break it. Things like that. So.
Okay. Well, thanks for that conversation. It was very useful. And so next week we'll be back and we'll have some new topics. And if anyone airs an emergent secret language, that was a Legend of Zelda reference, Jesse. If you want to present, please let me know. Otherwise, have a good week and see you around on Slack and in our other meetings.
All right, take care, everybody.
All right. Bye.